Hello, everybody. Welcome to Torn Tuesday, your weekly dose of all things Hobbit and Lord of the Rings. This is the OneRing.net Torn Tuesday video podcast. We're streaming live on Facebook, YouTube, Twitch, Twitter, anywhere they'll let us send a signal. We've been doing this show for over 10 years, over 500 episodes, and now I've put a screen between me and my co-host over there, Clifford Broadway.
Hello there. Nice to see you, everyone. Welcome to the OneRing.net. Again, we're bringing you all the goodness and all the mischief that we can, talking about the Rings of Power and the worlds of J.R.R. Tolkien. Intricate conversations we have had, many detailed conversations we have had, months and months, if not years, of excitement and a little bit of agony, all mixed in together with the Rings of Power. And now we're here at the end of season 1. And as we had promised, just as we'd promised a couple of weeks ago, we're going to do a full report card. No, I know we did a midterm. We did kind of like a middle of the semester kind of report card when we were halfway through that episode 4. Now that we've had the blessings of hindsight, I mean, such as it is, we're definitely going to do a full report card right now. So we encourage all of you folks who are with us in Instagram, in Twitter, Facebook, YouTube, welcome to the chat. Welcome. And we're going to be watching and talking and interacting with all of you and get your opinions and your insights. And we have some wonderful special guests who are also joining us to share as we prepare this full report card. Let's do an academic breakdown. Justin, let's do some introductions. I do see Caitlin. Hello, Caitlin. That is
Hi.
Tea with Tolkien, my love. It is so lovely to see you. And congratulations on the new bouncing bumble of joy that you
Thank
have.
you. Thanks for
So
having
exciting.
me.
So
fun to
exciting.
be here.
I'm gonna say that this is you have the official first Rings of Power baby.
Yeah.
I do, because I
Yeah.
was pregnant the whole time we were going to London and all of
Yeah.
that. And then she was born 2 days before the finale, so she got to watch with me. So
Oh,
that
that's
was fun.
fabulous. Congratulations. How do you have time? How do you have time to sit here with us? It's beyond me.
I have an extremely supportive husband who has the kids right now.
That is
That's
everything.
how, yeah.
That is everything. Everything in the world. Bless him. And congratulations to everyone in the family. It's wonderful. And also joining us there in the other corner is Mr. David Chambers, academic extraordinaire. Boy, does he know stuff about Tolkien. And boy, did he have a conversation that night at the Middle-earth Moot at San Diego Comic-Con. Did you or did you not actually stand there and corner the showrunners and talk to them about deep lore? Who was right next to you? It was Corey Olson, the Tolkien professor. And there, who was next to him? It was Matt, Nerd of the Rings. Everybody was there. But who took a shine on your penny? That was you, David. That was a great conversation, wasn't it?
Absolutely was. Thanks, you guys, for having me on.
It's good to have you here.
And we've invited some of our other friends who lead busy lives, and so they might jump in and out throughout the discussion. This is how it's going to work, folks. We've all seen the show, and if you have not seen Rings of Power, if you're coming to this wondering if you should watch Rings of Power, we're going to say that this is spoiler-filled. We're going to talk about everything that works and doesn't work, and we're going to grade each part of this show from a spoilerific perspective. Maybe I'll re-edit this later on for a non-spoiler version, but I probably won't. So this is all gears going, open conversation. We expect everybody watching live has seen every episode of season 1 of The Rings of Power. And we're going to go through each of these categories and grade them to the American report card system, which is an A through an F. A plus is just the best grade you can give.
Right.
F is total failure. And then a C is kind of like room for improvement, I guess.
Yes.
Caitlin, you look at report cards from your children.
Yes.
What is the threshold of a good grade?
I would say a C is, anything, a D and an F are pretty much failing, I guess, is what I would say. I think that's kind of the normal grades, isn't it?
Yeah, what is the point of a D? Like, it's just...
A D is like you didn't quite fail, but it's very, very bad. F is like you're screwed.
So when I was a kid, it was B is above average, C is average, and D is below average. And also F means failure, obviously. But when you're doing something below average, take heart. There's always hope. There's always room for improvement. So, any of you wonderful writers, anybody who's in the writer's room, or any of the showrunners who are watching us today, please, no more despair, as Theoden would say to his niece, right? I would have you smile again. So even if you get a D on one of your scores today, don't worry, guys. You've got seasons 2 through 5 to make those improvements. There's room to grow, right? Right. So
room to grow, and this is a group effort, folks. So everyone in the chat room, I'm watching you on YouTube. There is a ton of chatters,
look,
but I see,
and there's Nerd Cookies. Hello, Nerd Cookies, who's
I
joined
see
us.
Miss Callie is on Twitch, and the Chiv Knight is on our Discord, and of course Facebook is here as well. So as we go through this, we want to see what your grade is, and then we're going to compile. We're going to kind of look at what the chat room says, what our panelists say, and come to an agreement of what fandom is generally thinks of each of these categories. Now,
I think we should grade NAMPAT on every single category. Just forget the letter grades. We'll just go NAMPAT on every grade. No, let's not do that. Hello, Ellen. Nice to see you, Ellen. Lovely to have you here.
Emily's
I agree.
here.
Emily. Hello, Emily. It is so lovely to see you. I'm dying. I'm so glad you're here. Welcome.
Thank
This
you.
is so good to have you guys here. Fabulous. We'll put an idea together, and then we'll amalgamate the score based upon all of our panelists and what the folks in the chat are bringing to us. We'll have to do our best and crystallize the letter scores. We'll do our best.
Yes.
No.
All right. So we're gonna grade this. So we've got a lot to talk about and go through because everyone has opinions on each of these things. So let's start with. So overall, season 1. I just want to set the stage here. Season 1, by all metrics, is a success. It's a success for fans, and for Amazon, and for the Tolkien estate, and for the Legendarium. It has set a record number of viewers from episode 1 all the way to episode 9. The Varking, who runs the subreddit, has grown by millions of new fans that are coming into Reddit. They're coming into our Discord. I'm sure all of our communities, wanting to know more. Caitlin right there has created a introduction to the Silmarillion, which I hear is getting popular, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've gotten a ton of DMs. I think the most exciting thing has been getting a DM from someone who has a Rings of Power profile picture on their Twitter, and they'll be like, "Oh, I got really into the show and I have questions about Tolkien. Can you help me figure out which edition to buy, or tell me about your guide?" And so I can see people coming directly from the show to the book. So that's the
super
best. Exciting.
That's the best outcome.
Right.
It is. Like I said at Comic-Con during our big panel, pass or fail with the success of the series, we as a community of fans are probably the great beneficiary of a growing interest and a much more an evolved readership that has more readers coming to join us. So that's a good sign.
And I love all of the new Stan accounts that pop up on Twitter. We saw a bunch created for the hot dwarves of the Hobbit movies, and Thorin fangirls all over the place, and fanboys. But now we're seeing Halbrand and a lot of Stan accounts pop up. So look, the Lord of the Rings is strong. It's exciting. They're committed to 5 seasons. Season 2 is in production right now. They have just started filming season 2. They're still doing script rewrites. As we know, Peter Jackson and Philippa and Fran were writing throughout the entire production of Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. So writing is a fluid thing. So we're going to get into all of these aspects of filmmaking from our perspective as fans and a fan community of what is working and what we think of the show. And so let's start with some of the best stuff that we've seen in Rings of Power. Visuals. Everybody here in the chat, what is your grade for the visuals of Rings of Power?
I
Who
give him
wants
an
to start?
A.
Who wants to start?
A, Emily?
Yeah.
Oh yeah. A, definitely.
David?
Yeah, yeah, I'd say an A as well.
Chat room, I see some A's, A plus from
Hmm.
Queen Mel. So why does it work? Why is it across the board everybody gives the visuals an A?
I
Uh,
do too. I'm on that. Oh, look, there's a B. Someone said there's a B
Hmm.
and said the little bit of the lighting was off. Okay, look,
Hmm.
when I watch television, I can tell when the person they hired is a TV technician who's used to lighting a rig to make them look like whatever the TV set is they have to accommodate. When I watch a feature film, particularly when we watch the 6 films that were lit and photographed by Andrew Lesney for Peter Jackson's 6 films, we notice a big difference. All right. You go and talk to me about Harry Potter and the Goblet of Fire, and look at how bad the lighting is. Look at the way that actors are backlit. There's a shine on their hair. It looks like television. There's a lot of scenes that it looks like television. You go to other Harry Potter films, and they're very cinematographic, very cinematic.
well, those are
excuse me.
films. Television shows really
What
you can tell.
but this television show has aspired to be cinematic in all
Mhm.
of its ways, don't you think?
Yeah. It feels like it lit like a movie would be.
Mhm.
Like it doesn't feel like you're watching TV. Like when we watched it in that big theater, it felt like it fit that big theater. It didn't feel like we were watching an episode of a television show on a movie screen.
Mhm.
One of the big concerns from fans going into the show is this going to look like television fantasy? You know, there are a lot of comments about shows like The Witcher or Wheel of Time or any other fantasy shows over the last 10 years. They have a certain aesthetic. Um, and so I think a lot of fans were preparing themselves for the worst. Instead, we got the best. And every dollar of that $1 billion budget is seen on screen. At least that's my opinion on that. The of Gondor says the 4K picture quality was great, and if you had a chance to see it on an 8K Samsung TV, it still holds up.
Mm. Mm.
So
I definitely think it's an A plus. I think even someone complained about the Chihuahua being one of the things in the visual department that didn't quite work.
Yeah, that one didn't quite work for me, but maybe that's why I don't give it an A plus. But
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
well,
And
go
to
ahead.
try and go into just bring in a little bit of fair criticism, I do think, and it's more minor as far as we saw it in one scene, though it's a pretty big items. I think was the way that the rings looked in the last episode were a bit wanting as far as the visuals go. I will say that.
What did you want out of 3 rings?
Did you think
Well,
it looked like did it look like a De Beers commercial for a
the-
diamond wedding ring or what?
I believe someone on Twitter was saying, and I definitely agree, they look very much like they're, the kind that we would buy during our Halloween costume ones. Given, yes,
Disagree.
Interesting.
even the gems, and I noticed the same thing as far as watching it. I'm like, that's very odd that's how they look. But
on my rewatch this weekend, I will give I understand where that comment is coming from, but I have to remind everybody, as we've done throughout the season, Lord of the Rings, the films had a once in a generation talent in Andrew Lesney, the director of photography. He won all the Oscars.
Yes.
He just knew how to shoot. Even from like creating a bundle of Christmas lights to put in the reflection of Galadriel's eyes in Lothlorien, and using a filter on the camera to make every light source look like a star when they're in Lothlorien. It just when they're with the elves, it looks heavenly. And I watch on my second rewatch, I felt like the lands of the elves did not have any different visual appearance than any other place in Middle Earth. There was no what I'm talking about when you see a light point on the screen, it's a star, filter. There was none of that in season 1. So
But could that be because they aren't wearing the rings yet?
Mm.
I like this.
So
Okay.
I like this
they do.
justification in the
Mhm.
lore.
It's true though.
Or-
I mean, you're not wrong, but maybe that's why.
Or maybe
Maybe-
they haven't ascended to the level of wisdom that they have in the third age.
Wisdom creates magic. It's soft magic.
Yeah.
All right.
We'll talk about that a little later in the show. The Vin Cat in the YouTube chat says, I thought the exterior grand scale shots were A+. However, I couldn't help but notice that once we got a few of these sweeping shots of a location, characters typically move into small rooms without much scale. And I noticed that too. That was an interesting choice.
Yeah.
Contrast.
And look, 2 weeks ago I watched the Fellowship of the Ring. It was on TBS, so I watched it theatrical cut, pan and scan with commercials, like the worst way you can see it. But when they get when they get to Moria, I counted the number of rooms and locations we see by the time they leave Moria, and it was more in that 25 minutes than more scenes and more rooms and more locations than we've seen in the $1 billion 8 hours of Rings of Power. And I know this show has 50 hours to go, but I feel like with 8 hours of time on season 1, you could have shown us more than just like two rooms in Khazad-dûm. Like,
I've heard people say that. Why are we always back in Durin's living room? And
Mm.
Dee says,
I kind of had a thought on this. It kind of reminded me of a play where you do have a limited amount of set. And that also kind of seems to be the case when you have a lot of characters who are having a dialogue scene and they're kind of just fiddling around with their props. Like on the raft, and Galadriel's just like pulling on this rope for no reason.
For no reason.
2 minutes. And it feels goofy at first, but then it does, it just it makes me feel like I'm like sitting in the theater watching a play, and the focus is on the dialogue, and it's, you know, she's not really supposed to be doing anything. And I kind of feel like it's the same way with the settings. They are kind of showing you a more limited amount. And I think a lot of people who aren't super Tolkien fans like us have been really overwhelmed by the scope of the show. Like all of the people that I've talked to, just like in my neighborhood, who are just casual fans, have spoken about how they feel overwhelmed, where we're like underwhelmed almost because we aren't seeing enough. So I feel like they're trying to strike this balance of not showing too much, but also showing enough. So I think that's probably really difficult.
That is an interesting like stage presence, because every single city, like even Aragion, like we only see like one room. We go to Numenor and we only see like 2 rooms and like the tiniest of cells. So I don't know, like comparing, it's unfair to compare this show to Peter Jackson's because that was just a once in a lifetime thing. But the amount of places that we saw in Moria, and it was infinitely more and felt bigger and felt more than the 8 hours we got in Khazad-dûm. So when people say that there's been a lot, I've seen a lot of comments on the socials of like asking show, don't tell. Like it's almost like talk less, show more. This is what we're talking about. Like
like the title card, the big title card that changes.
Well, we'll get to the title. That's a whole different thing. Yeah, that's at the. But
that also is, to me, in the category of show, don't tell, in a way. But go ahead.
So moving on. Caitlin had a great transition to the next category, which is acting. The performances on this show, every actor brought it. And for a lot of these actors, this was their first movie or TV show. They were plucked right off the stage. Kind of a lot of these were stage actors, and some of them had some television background. Of course, Ismail has been in Star Wars and things like The Mandalorian and things like that. So what's everybody's grade on overall the performances in the show? David, we'll start with you.
I'm trying to decide. I am nearing more around at least an A minus or B. I did like everybody's acting in it, but the hard part for me is getting through, certain aspects as far as the dialogue writing, and
Well,
them
that's a
working with
different category.
right,
Mhm.
right, and so
So-
with them working with what they are given, I guess, is kind
Yes.
of that part, and so that's ultimately why I'm kind of like having a hard time deciding as far as them bringing more out of that what they were given, and so in that part, I would say I'd probably lean more and more towards the A minus.
Emily.
I don't want to seem like I'm copying you, but I was actually going to say A minus as well.
Yeah. The chat room, there's a lot of A minuses, some B pluses. So the chat room is right
Okay,
with you there.
yeah.
Caitlin, you've watched this show probably more than anybody.
It's true.
So you've been able to appreciate the performances. What do you think?
Yeah, I gave them an A plus. That's actually the highest score out of any of my categories. I feel like even the really minor roles, they just like acted their hearts out on the screen. Like even the watch warden when he has his line
Yes.
about the like not wanting to cut down the tree. Like I was just like, what? Like I was not expecting that. And then even Rowan, Theo's friend, when he's like crying out to Waldreg in his final scene, like that made me cry. So like I just feel like every cast member really seems to have brought like their full heart into the show.
Mhm.
And they are working with what they've got. So but I feel like in that
Right.
category they've all done like their absolute best, it seems to me.
Oh, absolutely.
Even the three witches who just came in on the last two episodes. I mean,
Mhm.
you immediately see them and their performance and their body language, just that they wholly captured their roles.
Yeah.
All of them, and they just looked cool, I thought. I don't know about like this shape shifting that quickly, but we can get into that under a different category. Cliff, what do you
Yes.
think about the performances on the show?
I really loved the performances because I was able to really closely feel. I was
Mhm.
feeling things, even though I was in the other half of my mind struggling with, discrepancies in the lore. I could still sense absolute terror in Bronwyn and Theo fighting that orc in their kitchen. I understood very clearly, even though I didn't like some of the cheesy dialogue of they're taking our jobs, those elves are taking our jobs and all that stuff. I still appreciate Farazan, and I like looking at his eyes and realizing there are almost infinite calculations of crazy business going on in his eyes that have to take us further and further through the seasons. Disa performing and singing and resonating, and Owain Arthur as Prince Durin, and even, forgive me, the actor who plays his father. So good. The actors really did shine for me, and I'll give them an A minus. And it would have been a higher grade, perhaps, if some of the dialogue coming out of their mouth was a little bit more, you definitely get an A minus there in the acting category, but we'll move on to dialogue later on, of course.
The chat room says Durin gets an A plus, Adar gets an A plus.
Yes.
And there are a couple other characters. I think you're right.
Yeah.
The supporting elves from the Watchtower were all on point. Like, within one or two lines of dialogue, we immediately understood the relationship Arondir has with them, and the stress of the situation that they're under, and how much stress they are under, and whether they feel like they will get out of this or they will be like it just on point all around. So the chat room started at A minus B plus, but everybody's like A, and there are some characters that are A plus.
Yeah.
So
Oh, definitely. I feel
Yeah,
like
like
it depends on the actor. Like I feel like Markella Kavanaugh was a real standout for me. The subtleties in her facial expressions And same with Mordred, like in that last scene with her and Elrond, where she's, come up out of the water after having this whole ordeal with Sauron. The looks on her faces when she's trying to decipher if this is really her friend or blinking, trying not to cry thing. Like I feel like because we got to see up close of a lot of these characters, we got to see the like facial expression subtleties really, really well.
I agree with that. Like, I think it's hard to, especially with such a large ensemble cast, just to bring down just a single grade, because there are like this. I think the standout ones like Adar, like Elrond, Disa, and Durin, like the ones that were just like the whole dialogue between. I mean, every scene with Elrond and Durin, pretty much, but especially the one where they're talking about their fathers and going into Eärendil, and all that were just on point.
Yeah, and I think going into the show, everyone is getting kind of nervous that they had 22 featured actors, and they all came to our Comic-Con party, and they all showed up at the New York premieres and London events, and the fans were invited along for that, and everybody got to start to meet these people. I really thought that they had 22 featured actors because a lot of them have to die. Like, we know that Elrond and Isildur survive in Galadriel.
Isildur isn't going to make it out from under that burning house. Come on. Come on.
He's dead. I don't know what you're talking about.
That's a different category. Let's stay on acting right now.
When Aragorn was dragged off the side of that cliff with that warg, you knew he wasn't coming back. Come on. Come on.
We'll talk about that later.
Well, I'm telling you, I don't like these staged fake deaths. It's like, come on, we know better.
Unnecessary. Yeah, unnecessary. All right,
anyway.
but
when there's so many characters that they could be killing off, I don't know why they're like doing these fake outs with the characters that we know
survive.
Well, especially someone as memed as Isildur, like the whole like throw it into the fire meme is so prevalent. Even if you've never watched the movies, you've seen that. Like,
all right. Well, I think YouTube chat poll. I finally figured out how to do polls on YouTube. They say not an A+. It's definitely an A. So acting gets an A. Next category, the pacing. So the pacing of the show, this is just an overall thing. I think on our midterm report card, the pacing did not get a good review, did not get a good grade because it was slow as molasses. Nothing was happening. And even in, I think it was episode 5, there was a review from either Fortune or Vulture that said... it was in Forbes. Forbes said 15. The plot is moved forward 15 minutes in an excruciating 75-minute episode.
That was fair. That was fair.
Now, if you think about it, though, that's very Tolkien.
but is it though? Is it?
Read the Fellowship of the Ring.
There was the end of episode 4. Right at the end of episode 4, there was this big crescendo of beautiful, beautiful music from Bear McCreary. Dun, 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 we're getting to go. People are mobilizing on Numenor. It's going to be amazing. And the next episode, episode 5, more 70 minutes of laborious setup. Set up. That was when the pacing felt particularly waterlogged. It really was at that point in episode 5.
I will say the pacing, the plot that I felt had the best pacing overall was probably the Southland plot. I was not disappointed. Like, that's probably the one plot I was not disappointed by, or didn't have like much critique about as far as pacing. I felt like because also they're new characters created for the show, so like we get to have them established, and so it felt very natural and organic as far as who these characters are and how that moved along from them as guards and then down to them like we need to evacuate the town.
I get that. So what would you grade overall, with those last 3 episodes moving at a clip? What the pacing, what is it, a C? Is it a B? Is it average?
I gave it a C-.
Yeah.
C-.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Yeah, and you've seen it the most.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like what was really hard for me is how many different plot lines we had to jump back and forth between each episode. I think episode 6 was my favorite because we were able to just stay in one spot the whole time. Because you would have this really intense scene happening, and then you would have to switch to the Harfoots, which are my least favorite plot line. No offense. And it's just like what's happening this whole time. And they're like everything with them is very slow, which like okay, I get it. It's hobbits, that's their thing. But it felt like it broke up the story in such a way that it just made it kind of hard to hang on. Like I'm fully invested in the show, so I am going to get through it no matter what. But if I weren't, I could have seen myself maybe turning it off as it kind of started slowing down in certain points or like skipping. I think just because it was so broken up, there were so many things going on.
Yeah.
I heard a lot of reports from people saying I was watching the show so late at night and the pacing was so slow. It was this somnambulist effect. It's just a lot of people told me I regret dozing off, but every single time I'm watching Rings
Me
of
too.
Power after my late night work shift, I find myself dozing off because of the pacing. I heard that a lot.
It's not just late night. The show, I'm lucky to live in Los Angeles. The show debuted every week Thursday night at 9 p.m. Prime time for me, right? I fell asleep during episode 4 and 5. It's like, get on with this. Like, Lord of the Rings should not be this boring. But maybe that's just my unique opinion on this. Emily, what did you
Justin,
think?
okay, you cannot tell me that Tolkien doesn't take a long time to get places when there is at least a page and a half in Fellowship of the Ring detailing the logistics of Frodo selling his furniture. Like, there are very many slow parts in the books, especially in Fellowship of the Ring, but that is my own issue. I kind of
that's
agree,
fair.
and I'm gonna power through it no matter what. Like I didn't ever find myself having a hard time following along. I feel like maybe like episodes 3 and 4 were kind of the worst pacing wise for me. I didn't have a problem with 1 and 2, and it obviously got better. I much preferred the last 3 episodes where we're kind of all in one place, but I did hear the same things about how like especially my husband who's not a Tolkien person, he struggles like staying awake watching things. Like he was like bored. So I feel like for me, I don't mind, but I think it was detrimental for the casual average viewer to have the pacing as it was. Like I would probably get like a C plus, I guess, but that is my thoughts. Like it didn't bother me, but I think it was detrimental to the casual viewer.
Yeah, so C plus. That's about where the poll on YouTube is going. It's right now a C, a solid C. But does it deserve the minus? Caitlin was saying. Here's what I will say about that. Emily just pointed out something that is really important. Is that as Tolkien fans, we're the ones that get texted and called by our family and friends, like, "Hey, does this get better?" Or "What's up with that thing?" Or "Is that true to the lore?" Or does this person really die? Like we get the lore questions from our friends and family. So the fact that we're saying, "Yo, the pacing is really off," and then I have family that got to like episode 4 and was like, "Dude, like, does it get better? Like, does it speed up? Does it?" Because it's not right now. So the pacing becomes an issue because are we supposed to like defend the show? Like, give it time. It's going to get great. Give it I feel like it causes us to do more work to support the show.
Yeah.
I do feel like it does get better though. So you can tell people
it does.
to just hold on. And that's the same thing I tell them when they're trying to read like the Silmarillion or the Fellowship. Like you just have to commit.
I
And
agree.
it's work a little bit at the beginning, but I think it's worth it in the end.
I think the pacing.
Thank you for saying that, Caitlin. Go ahead, Justin. Sorry.
I was just going to say, I think that the pacing could be improved if we and I think it's alluded to everybody in this room, just stick with a storyline and like get to a place of completion on that storyline and then jump to the next one. Like the intercutting, And I go back to Peter Jackson's Two Towers, which was the most difficult movie to edit of all of the Lord of the Rings films. In fact, it was so strenuous that the editor on Two Towers quit the biz and never edited a film again. Um,
Wow.
but you think of all the storylines that Two Towers was dealing with, right? You know, the Fellowship had been split up into three, and then there's the Orc camp, and then there's the Saruman thing, and then they introduced double the cast with Rohan, and we hadn't even met Gollum until then. So, like the editing of all that, I feel like pacing is an editing problem, and so maybe look at the editing. Cliff, final words.
Well, I understand exactly what Caitlin and Emily have identified. When we talk to brand newbies, and I mean newbies, and they're reading the Fellowship of the Ring for the first time, and they struggle. They struggle with, oh, are we going to the Old Forest now? Are we going to spend a couple of chapters collecting lily pads
Yeah.
and talking about flowers?
It's so boring. Like,
And-
please get to the point. Like,
It is.
we're struggling.
I know you guys have said this to your friends, and I have said it so many times in my life. Keep going till you get to the chapter called Strider. As soon as you get to that chapter called Strider, and Professor Tolkien even admitted that he did not have a clear idea who this person was that showed up suddenly as he was writing the chapter. We also know historically that Professor Tolkien rewrote the opening chapters of The Lord of the Rings a couple of times, scrapped everything, and started over again. Allegedly, this has become like a mythological size, like rumor that Professor Tolkien himself had a slow start and then wanted to redo things until he got to where he got, which was the chapter Strider. And then everything moves like an engine, and it moves and it moves and it moves. I kind of got that feeling that episode 4 and 5 were really Dullsville. Then when Charlotte Branstrom comes in to direct episode 6, I thought I was watching a completely different show. I really thought I was watching a different show. I watched episode 6, breathless, on the edge of my couch, going like, and I wasn't doing that with episodes 4 or 5 at all. It really felt like a real distinct and different pop that was coming into the show. And that was Charlotte and her approach to directing. So yeah,
and I think, and we keep talking about episode 4 and 5 on this, and that was directed by Wayne Chi Yip, who also directed episode 8. And if our friend Matt at Nerd of the Rings got to interview Wayne, and Varking did as well on Reddit, and they actually called him out to his face about the slow motion shots. Like, dude, you got to chill with the slow motion shots. They're not working.
When there's so much ground to cover and there's only 8 episodes, anytime things go into slow motion, I'm like, stop. Like, there's so much more I want to see here. And if you have such little time, like, let's just go.
I feel like the slow motion was not used for a narrative effect. It was used for emotional effect. Like, look
Like
how happy
cinematic.
Galadriel is on a horse finally. It's the only happiness you'll see all season. Which was a choice. All right, so pacing is a C all around.
minus. It's a C
Is it
minus.
is it a
It's
C minus? I'm a C minus.
Can
All
we
right,
settle on that, everybody in the room?
raise your
Settle on
hand if
that.
you're a C minus.
Look,
C minus.
I'm fine with that.
Okay,
Okay.
C minus. Oof. So, if you're watching, folks at Amazon, we've stated our case. All right, next. This is a very, very difficult thing, Cliff. I'll let you start with
please.
the writing of the show. Before explaining anything, just give it a grade. Let's just go around the room. Give it a grade.
The writing in general, without
writing.
any other exposition and me blathering about it.
Yep.
The writing deserves a couple of different grades. Some of it was so good. It was
Stop
great.
talking. Just give me a grade.
I need 2 grades.
All right,
I
2
need
grades.
2, okay? When it was good, it was B plus, A minus. And when it was bad, it was D. It was D level when it was bad. Because, look, Professor Tolkien never mentions poop, or feces. It does not happen. Ever. Ever. And I will still not forgive that little crack of a joke at the dinner table. I will. Sorry. And you know what? Here's a problem. I had a problem when Mary and
No. Stop. Grade.
All right, fine. The grade of the writing is, it's either B plus or D minus. You choose.
All right, David.
You choose.
Grade.
I'd have to go with a D.
Caitlin.
I gave it a C.
Emily.
I'm going B.
All right, we got a D,
Okay.
a C, a B. Cliff can't make up his mind. The chat room. Where is the chat room right now? We are live on Discord and Twitch and Facebook and Twitter and YouTube. And right now, we have a 42% has a C, and next is a D at 35%.
David Webb
C
wants to give it an X. X is a legit grade, David. Yeah, let's give it an X. That's fine.
All right. So, David, you gave it a D. Explain your case.
Oh, okay. So, I mean, obviously, I think we all have ideas as far as like, oh, like what could have been done differently and all that. I think there's a lot more. So the things that stick out, kind of like the line that Finrod tells Galadriel back when they're on Valinor. A lot of it is kind of emblematic, kind of like some of the hokey type of lines that seem more profound, that kind of are spoken as if they're more profound than they actually are. I think that's the type of dialogue writing that is kind of just more emblematic of the show. In addition to that, there's, and it's one of my biggest gripes with it, is really the over reliance on the Peter Jackson films. And I know, like, you know, we're told not to, you know, compare the two, or they're two different things, but it makes it very difficult not to do that when it progressively gets, when we progressively get more and more allusions or just direct references to the Peter Jackson films, whether it be very explicit shots or very explicit dialogue lines, that it's just referencing those.
Like, I always follow my nose.
Yes. Or speaking of noses, orcs sniffing out for Galadriel and Theo underneath the log.
What do your elf?
Mordor.
What do you smell?
Just and the thing is, like, in episodes, I feel like it's progressively got worse in regards to that. Like, I feel episodes 1 and 2, like, it was more minor, but then as they got towards the end of the season, it was almost like, oh, we have like 5+ of these types of callbacks, or like these types of shots or pieces of dialogue that refer back to the Peter Jackson movies.
Yes, I hear you.
Yeah, you do not want to play a drinking game where you have to do a shot every time they have a Peter Jackson callback, because I don't think you would end up too healthy at the end of that.
Be the new Dwarven contest.
All right, look, some of the writing was so delicate and beautiful when the Harfoots were talking about the people who had passed and the memories of the people they'd left behind. And that was lovely. That was a lovely space. And then there's the moment when Elrond and Durin have an elevator conversation. All right. This is an identifiable cliche of television writing. They've been doing it forever, but they don't have elevators in Middle Earth. So because of a problem with them shooting scale doubles, with the two of them walking side by side, they decided to change the entire conversation to where they're in a lift. So that, you know, some of it works really well. That elevator conversation, even though it was a convenient use of a familiar TV trope, it worked, and I really like the dialogue between them. But there's other bits and bobs, like, you know, the sea is always right. And just like someone in the chat very cleverly said, ships float, rocks sink. I'm like, okay. There are some bits that just are so squishy, they don't sound like they belong in this world of Arda. And
yeah, and you know what really didn't You know what really didn't sound like it belonged in this world of Arda or the world of elves? Schedules.
Oh yeah, business schedules. Yeah, a
Like
workforce, a workforce.
a
Right.
workforce, a schedule, timelines. Emily, you gave it a B. Defend your case.
Yes. Okay. This is my defense. I feel like the Peter Jackson references, again, looking at it from the lens of a casual viewer who they're trying to hook into the show, that, I mean, most casual Lord of the Rings fans, their probably only exposure to the world is by the Peter Jackson movies. So I think it's kind of smart to have a lot of references. I did also notice how like they kind of get more frequent as it went on, which is a little meh. But like I think I can defend that them doing that for the sake of tying it to the very successful Peter Jackson movies to kind of hook in these casual viewers. Um, I gave it a B because to me, what stuck out more was the really, really good lines of dialogue. The parts that felt really Tolkienian to me just carried more weight than the lines that were off or bad or cringe or cliche. Like I noticed them. Some of them I didn't. Some of them people pointed out to me afterwards because it just didn't register. It didn't bother me. I don't know if maybe that's because my exposure was from the Peter Jackson movies first, or I'm just not as like bogged down with the negatives about it. But I just feel like the really good lines of dialogue were they won me over more than the bad lines, you know, took me down a notch, I guess.
If you
Yeah.
want to watch some of the best content that really dives into the writing and comparison against Tolkien, I do recommend finding Dr. Corey Olson, the Tolkien professor. He's done some amazing multi-hour streams and conversations about the writing of the show. We also have an article on our website from Linden to Poughkeepsie, right? And it talks about the writing style of Tolkien versus the writing style of the show. And it actually does a deep dive into why this doesn't feel like Tolkien. So I guess as we go to Caitlin now, the chat room the poll on YouTube has 39% C and 33% D. So does this deserve a C minus? The writing.
I feel like when it was good, it was so good. And that's why I didn't give it a C minus or a D. But then when it was bad, it really did pull me out of the kind of immersion of the whole show. So, but it's so hard to say. I don't know. This one was one of my most difficult grades just because I just feel like it was so all over the place. So
Mhm.
good at sometimes, so weird at other times. It just, I don't know.
I agree with Cliff. I think it needs two. I think we need to grade the good dialogue and the
Yeah.
bad dialogue separately because the good is so good. Like I don't want to drag down those really, really like there were some lines that I had to like pause and be like, did Tolkien not write that? Like some of it was so good. So I don't want to like drag down
Mhm.
the accomplishments of crafting some really Tolkienian dialogue with
Well,
the iffy parts.
especially like Adar, like all of Adar's
Yes.
lines from like when he meets Arondir to his dialogue with Galadriel, even with like the orcs, that was so well written. Like, and I agree too. Like, I think we need two different grades for it because stuff like that, the dialogues and the scenes with Disa, Durin, and Elrond are just phenomenal. Very moving. Like those are things that those exchanges didn't happen between Elrond and Durin, but you can see the Tolkien aspect of it. The same with Adar, like as far as they're also children of the one, are they not? Like, and bringing in that more complexity. I do like that part in the writing for this is that we get to see complexity not only just of the dwarves, we get to see complexity of the orcs. But then there's also the other side that I feel like with that complexity is the elves, we do see a little bit of like their own shortcomings or hubris, but I would like to have a little bit more of why Tolkien wrote they developed the rings, as far as and why they stayed after the first stage, after the War of Wrath, why Galadriel stayed, and why Gil-galad and all the other elves and their seeking their own dominion. I wish they would have had that kind of added into the mix of the making them more complex and well rounded out, as far instead of just pure and noble with not much else going on.
It almost felt like there were too many different ideas going around in the writer's room, and there wasn't like a one cohesive goal that they were all working towards, because of the way that everything felt so all over the place. Like it didn't feel like everything, like obviously things are written by different people, but if you're telling a story, I would want the story to all feel like it was written by the same mind, if that makes sense.
I get
Yeah.
I
that.
think
Mhm.
maybe
I
they
get
need to
that.
kind of come together to kind of all go in the same direction.
And to
Yep.
that point, if you notice on the credits, episode 2 has one writer, Jennifer Hutchinson. Episode 8 has 4 writers. So that did happen. They just, didn't. I don't know what happened. Did they not trust the writer of each episode to deliver? So they just like, you do that part, you do that part. So part of me thinks that, oh yeah, you know what? Give that writer the entire Durin Durin story. Give that other writer the entire Celebrimbor story. But now that we've seen it in action, it doesn't work. It's not cohesive. It's not consistent.
Yep.
And
You're right.
I think this could be solved with better editing. If you know that the different parts of the show feel so different, then keep it contained. Like, tell the complete story. All of that lore building with Adar and was just amazing. So, all right, are we?
Let's say this much. There's an influence on this TV show to make it look and smell and sound like Tolkien, but it's also a TV show that they want to look and smell and sound like a modern American television show. And this is where there's a split. I mean, I really love that Adar is planting seeds. He is not really an elf. He's an orc 1.0, early version of the software before that software gets refined and redeveloped. And he is also stuck still being part elf. And he goes behind the tree, hiding from the vision of his other orc people, and starts planting these seeds. That's good writing. That's really excellent, interesting writing. And then there's other stuff that comes up, which is just really weak sauce to me, like abandoning Galadriel in the middle of the ocean without a conversation about elves dying of hypothermia, where they give the character a binary choice, only a binary choice. Jump off that ship or go right on into Valinor, which doesn't happen. And there are difficulties I have, especially with the mystery boxing. And this is why I want to give the writing a lower grade. A more critical observation of this writing is because Professor Tolkien did not give us a story in the appendices of nobody knows who Halbrand is. You know what Tolkien gave us? They knew who Anatar was, that Anatar was to a degree a suspicious person. Anatar had to tolerate Galadriel, giving him like a critical eye and the side eye, and Anatar had to tolerate being kicked out of Lindon. He was kicked out of Lindon and was not able, all this stuff that we got that is in the appendices, we didn't get it in the TV series. We got this other artificial construct of a Halbrand character who was never written about, instead of all the court intrigue in Eregion of, is Celebrimbor gonna treat with this guy? Is he gonna listen to the tutelage of this guy? Or is he gonna pay attention to the constant friction coming from Galadriel and other characters saying, don't deal with this guy? And you know what? The audience lost all of that irony, that narrative, that dramatic irony, right? Because we, the audience, would have known who Anatar was, and the other characters did not. I want to talk about that seriously. Tolkien already gave us the blueprint of this remarkable story, and it played out in episode 8 in about 15 minutes. And it wasn't even Anatar in the room; it was Halbrand. And I'm like, what's going on here? What's going on here? So I'm done. Sorry, that's my
Well, all right.
complaint about
Well,
it.
I just to tack onto that point, I think because I had the initial gut reaction from episode 8 as well. It's like, okay, it's Halbrand. But then as I sat more with it, I realized it was less necessarily that that's how he looks. Like it always, in the the interviews they did, they've written about in the articles, they talk about them trying to be approaching it in the next season of more inspired by the text. I think the thing why I disliked it the most though is that they did introduce the concept of Sauron being a reformer and a healer. Yet I don't recall throughout the rest of the season Halbrand hinting at any type of aspect of showing his motives of trying to be a reformer healer, which I think would have made that a lot better in my opinion. Like we get the clear signs obviously from the very moment he's on the raft of looks could be deceiving, the whole Anatar on Numenor in prison advice that he gives to Galadriel. So I get all those like small pieces are there that point to him being Sauron, but more of the motives. Or else why is he on the raft, Numenor, and then eventually come back if he just left there? And then obviously the shoehorning in of the creation of the rings without further development of that.
Yeah, and the chat room has I love our chat room. Thomas Kelly says if you listen to the official podcast with Felicia Day, the showrunners hint that we may see Anatar. So that the door is open. As we move on to Fidelity, which I'll define, I will say on the writing, going into this show for the last 2 years, writing has been the fans' number one most biggest concern.
True.
Tolkien, it starts with Tolkien. It starts with writing. It starts with Christopher. It starts in the appendices and bridges to Christopher's Silmarillion stories, and now Simon Tolkien is there. But the writing, you have to trust the writers. And the fact that we had Jennifer Hutchinson writing singularly episode 2, and then she has to share with 3 other writers on episode 8. Trust your writers, and just trust your writers. And give one writer one episode. And if they're not gelling with one of the storylines, they've got to go. All right. There's plenty of capable, award-winning, talented writers that are ready to jump into this show. There's so much talent to draw from. The other thing I'll say about writing is that I'm kind of bummed out that half the writers' room were women, and only Jennifer got episodes this season. I mean, where's Helen? From Hannibal.
Yeah, where's Helen? But
yeah,
you should look at the Writers Guild and the way that they negotiate contract deals. That's where that happens.
The writing was just all over the place, and I think a solid C. All right, Fidelity to Tolkien is something that Cliff has been championing for the last 2 years. And it's not just fidelity to the written page and what Tolkien and Christopher wrote. It's a fidelity to the feeling and the sense of Tolkien and what Tolkien stood for in his writings. And
dare we say thematic purpose?
The spirit versus the letter of the writing.
Yeah, the thematic purpose can be done without being super literal. It can still match the thematic construct and the idea.
So the chat room is immediately on FFF, C-FF.
But they're all thinking about lore. That they didn't listen to what you just said. They're only thinking about fidelity to the written word.
So Emily, what grade would you give it?
If we're talking about lore, I do think they would not get a super great score just for being true to exactly what Tolkien wrote. But I think they did a fairly good job at staying true to the themes. Like, I thought the whole storyline with the Harfoots felt very Tolkien, like the family, the relationship between the Harfoots and the stranger, especially Nori. Um, I mean, Elrond and Durin's friendship is like so classic Tolkien, and again, bringing in the writing they did really good with that relationship, as did Owain and Robert. Like, when we talked to him on the subreddit with Will, he just talked about how he and Robert went off, and Owain went off and with Robert, and they did little adventures on their own to kind of build up that friendship. So I think the actors especially understood the fidelity to Tolkien's work. I know many of them
Mm.
are fans, especially Robert. I know Benjamin as well did a lot of research on Gil-galad, and so I think the actors deserve a lot of credit for research into Tolkien, especially characters that are not fully fleshed out, like Lloyd Owen with Elendil and Maxim Baldry with Isildur. Um, and I think, I think the themes were there. I think there were a couple of lore changes, like the change with the creation of the rings and the change with Galadriel getting on the boat to Valinor and jumping off. Like, only to me, only the really big changes affected the fidelity of the themes that much. I don't know. I feel like I have to split it down the middle again and give it like a C plus B minus for fidelity, just because.
David, do you agree?
I would have to do like subcategories for fidelity. If like fidelity to the themes of Tolkien, I would give it a high grade as far as its themes of hope amidst despair, the eucatastrophic amongst the dyscatastrophic, um, the overcoming of differences in order to unite against a greater darkness that's looming. Yeah, I give that a much higher grade.
Yeah.
And then fidelity to lore being the other aspect, because I do think that lore can inform also some of the themes at the same time, though.
Mhm.
Like, given the whole aspect of Tolkien writes and was, I think, letter 154 and a couple of other ones, as far as, I mean, going back with the elves in the Second Age, that they're trying to embalm their kingdoms. Their whole arts and craft turns into one, from just beautifying into embalmment.
Yeah,
And
yeah, slowing down time. Yeah, that's why Peter Jackson sped up the film so that it would play back in Lothlorien very slow, all through Lothlorien, because of that embalming effect. Yeah, that's right.
And so I do think lore is important, also because that's what we read, it's what we love, it's what attracts us to it. But at the same time, and again, like, I think there, and with lore, like, I think my gut reaction would be giving it a D in regards to fidelity to the lore, albeit they do a great job. Like, I love that they bring in stuff from Morgoth's Ring, stuff from Unfinished Tales and Histories of Middle Earth, as far as like the whole things that we know Tolkien was wrestling with at the end of his life regarding the orcs. I like those types of nuances that they do bring in, but then there's the things like the Cimmeral Mithril connection, and why that just feels more contrived than it needs to be. There's the aspects of kind of heightening the Noldoran and dwarf relations, and kind of breaking up Celebrimbor into all these other different roles. Whereas I feel like it should be Celebrimbor who's best friends with Durin and having that type of thing. It should be, and kind of in my mind, I was like, it'd be awesome if they could still have that dwarf elf tension if they had kept Celeborn in the mix. Have Celebrimbor and Celeborn in Eregion. Celebrimbor is trying to befriend the dwarves, and he has this great friendship. But then here comes Celeborn, having fled Doriath with his own, bigotry and prejudices, and
Big
that's
old
where you
chip,
get that tension.
big chip on his shoulder about dwarves, especially. Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So I get what you're what you're saying. It's like, oh, there's too many things. Like, it's unfair to grade it. So here's the thing: in school, in PE, I would not ever get an A because I could run a 5-minute mile, but I couldn't do 20 pull-ups. So, it's just PE, right? Like you get one grade. And so you get one grade on Fidelity. You have to be good at all the parts of it. So, David,
Okay.
what's your
C
grade
minus.
on C
C
minus?
minus.
Yep.
Cliff, what's your grade?
C minus.
Caitlin?
C minus.
Oh!
Uh,
C minus.
Close to a D. Close to a D.
yeah,
But
very
let's
close. I think
Mhm.
I am very excited for season 2 to have a much higher grade. I'm sure
Yeah.
they're listening to us and they're going to do a great job.
Here-
I would like to draw everyone's attention to Thomas in the YouTube chat. He says fidelity to lore that Tolkien would have changed himself often and often enough until he died. We're not talking about a religious text here. I hope that we never treat Tolkien that way. This is art, so it is open to be adapted. And Professor Tolkien himself was constantly revisiting and revising and rewriting all these things to a point of indecision. In fact, Professor Tolkien's indecision about the appendices and the content that would be in the appendices was so delayed because he kept changing his mind, it literally delayed the publication date of The Return of the King because Tolkien could not get his stuff together and get it to the publisher on time. So I understand that point. I do understand that point, but still,
I will say
Yeah.
the YouTube chat is 38% C, 40% D. This is so
Mhm.
C minus D. I will say this: I am shocked at my own personal opinion on the fidelity because I do not put a heavy emphasis on fidelity to the lore. For the last 2 years, all I've wanted was, Galadriel dating. I want young Galadriel, playing the scene.
No,
No.
Justin, we
Justin,
know.
Like,
No.
but even on this show, even not knowing all the lore like you guys, the mithril on a tree that leads into the rocks that wakes up a Balrog with a falling leaf. I'm just like, come on. This doesn't feel like Tolkien at all. This does not feel like Tolkien. And what were you gonna
I
say?
think when it comes to the fidelity aspect, I think we'll get to this when we talk about marketing, but I think it was marketed as if it was something that it's not. And so I feel like we all came into it expecting it to be more of a closer retelling of the story that it's supposed to be based on. And I think if they would have kind of maybe held our hand and walked us down this road that they all knew we were going to go down, but I don't know, I just feel like they didn't prepare their audience very well for what it was going to be. Because I
Like,
really do
part of
feel
it-
like it's like a retelling of a myth. It's a new version of Middle Earth. And it's not, you're not going to find these stories in the books because they aren't there. And I just feel like the audience wasn't prepared for that because of the way it was marketed.
Yeah. No, part of it is the changes, and then part of it is the not being prepared for the changes and kind of being almost like gaslit about the changes, being like, no, that's not going to be changed. Like, that's so obvious. Why would we change that? And then they were like, psych, we did do exactly that. And you were like, wait, I thought that was way too obvious and like you wouldn't do that. So now
Because
I'm confused.
In every
Right.
interview, they were like, back to the books, back to the books, back to the books.
Yes,
And now
yeah.
I'm watching the show. I'm like,
I was like,
nobody made you say that. You could have just told us what the show was going to be.
Yeah, exactly.
I don't understand what the point of leading us down one direction was, and then the show goes a completely different direction. And I love the show for what it is, but it's not what they wanted us to think it was for some reason.
Yeah,
Yeah,
definitely.
I definitely agree with that. And I think that kind of with that lore aspect too, it's also like there's things where I'm okay with there being changes to it. Like I'm probably the biggest proponent there is of I'm glad they kept Tom Bombadil out of the Fellowship of the Ring.
Yes.
I get a lot of hate for this because even in the books, I'm not as big of a fan of Tom Bombadil. I know he has his purpose, but I also
Oh my
know
gosh,
Tolkien's own
thank
views on
you.
his letters, that he kept them in there, one as a type of publicity for his collection, as well as kind of an homage to the British fairy tale authors who came before him, as like a, what does he call it, like a kind of like a waiting space for them to go on their way to Mount Doom in his letters. But I don't like the contrivances when it doesn't need to be there. Like the Mithril Cimmeril thing is something that's like, you had a good enough explanation, I feel like, in the books that you guys could have gone with, and you contrive something else that doesn't really fit. I think those are the things that I'm less of a fan of, and that kind of where it just rubs the wrong way.
The thing is that in some recent interviews, I think it was in Vulture, the showrunners say that Simon Tolkien, who is currently the lore expert involved with the show. Simon Tolkien is the grandson, right, of J.R.R. And Simon is the one that's kind of pushing the showrunners to go in certain directions with the lore. And they said that Simon's current ethos when it comes to the fidelity of the show has been using Christopher as a benchmark. Like, what would Christopher do? That's kind of how they presented it in their art in their interviews. Showrunners are saying that Simon Tolkien keeps telling them, what would Christopher do? I personally think that is absolutely the wrong thing to say, because Christopher did not like the movies that won all the awards. In fact, won more awards than any other movie in history. Christopher was not a fan of the medium of film or television. So Christopher just never understood the medium, never liked the medium. And I'm sure the family likes the checks that the medium provides to the family. But using Christopher as your tent pole of like, this is where we should head, I think is wrong, because Christopher never looked at the Legendarium as the film and television as an appropriate place, his favorite place for it. So I just don't think, like, the fact that the showrunners went to the press, said that Simon Tolkien uses Christopher Tolkien as the mark, that's not the mark. And I think a lot of these changes that the showrunners felt, oh yeah, if Simon approves of this, then the fans will go on board. I don't think we're on board, and the fact that we're all on a C- or a D, YouTube has a D. The final thing I'll say about Fidelity is mystery boxes are not Tolkien. Stop it. Stop with the mystery boxes. You don't have to put everything under a mystery behind a cloak and wait until episode 8 to reveal. That's not what it is. I don't know how many times I need to say this. Stop with the mystery boxes. Cliff, do you agree?
You can have other people say it another 1,000 times besides you, and I will back you up in that chorus, that growing chorus of voices.
So are we saying
mystery boxing? Look, why is it that we're still at the end of season 1, and Matt, Nerd of the Rings, and others in our circle of friends are discussing about the stranger? Is the stranger really Olorin, or is he really one of the blue wizards, or is he really Gandalf, or are we arguing about the ability of them to license and use the name Olorin? And all of us are just sick of it. Sick of the mystery boxing.
Okay, I think all right. I think that the grade is there. Do we give it a C- or do we give it a solid D?
I don't know. Fidelity. What did YouTube say? If they said D, then
they said D.
No, I'm fighting.
I'm good with the D.
I'm fighting for C- because I feel like YouTube chat is particularly negative. So
yeah, I'll give you that. Cliff, you be the tiebreaker.
It's just the question is the. Okay, I see you guys in the chat. You guys are so awesome. I love you. I love this audience. Okay, but please, in terms of fidelity, it really should be fidelity to the theme or fidelity to the book lore. No, I really appreciate Emily making those distinctions, and everyone else here with us. Yeah, I got to give it a C-. It is less than. There is a serious problem ongoing with the mystery boxing. We are lacking the dramatic irony of we, the audience, knowing all the time who Anatar is, while those poor suckers wandering around Eragion, they do not. They do not know who Anatar is. So
Yeah.
I'm missing all of that. It's sorry. I'm sorry, but it's a C
All right,
minus.
No, that's fair.
let's move on to something that I think will get a higher grade. Let's start with Caitlin. Special effects and visual effects.
I gave it a B plus.
Interesting. B plus. Why
I
not the
think
A?
It was. I don't know. I just felt like giving it a B plus. This one
David.
was. I didn't have a lot of thoughts on this one.
Let's see. I probably would go around to like, man, I know you guys are gonna hate me for this again, but around a B or an A. But then and that's the hard part for me is that some of it is informed, like some of my more critical parts are informed by, those kind of Peter Jackson like scenes, like things like the eye in the forge at the end. I didn't really need to see that, like those types of effects. But the quality of it is, I guess, is where I go more with like B or A, like the quality of those special effects and visual effects.
They brought it. Emily, what do you think?
Oh, it has to be an A. I feel like same with visuals. Like they did really knock it out of the park with the visual. And also I feel like the the effects also benefit from the fact that they did use a lot of practical effects and they didn't rely so much on the visual effects, so that when they did use them, it was more, I don't want to say like striking, but like it benefits from it being a lot of practical effects, because then the visual effects don't, age as badly, they don't stick out as much. Like, I don't know.
A plus for me.
Okay.
The volcano could have gone very wrong, but it went very right visually.
Yes.
And all of the orcs, not one of them looked CG.
Mhm.
Like none of the bad guys look
Mm-mm.
CG. None of the
Yeah.
main characters look CG, and that is an accomplishment to Weta Workshop and the entire prosthetics department and the performers under them, like Jed Brophy. Congratulations, Cliff. What do you give?
Oh yeah, it's definitely an A. Solid A. Loved it. I
Mhm.
loved what I saw, and I could tell that we're looking at every penny on screen when you're looking at it. I could see that,
Mhm.
and I
This is
really
where
enjoyed it.
this is where $1 billion does Tolkien correct.
There's a legit complaint. Somebody mentioned in the chat that the scenes on the ship, those actors should have been moving around more with the pitch and the movement of the ocean. We didn't see exactly a really realistic of being on those waves. And I agree with that observation. That's the only drawback, is that a couple of the scenes on the ships, there should have been somebody off screen throwing buckets of water on them, and the actors
Like
should not have,
splashing.
yeah. I've been deep sea fishing all of my life, and there's never a moment where you're just standing there on the deck of the ship,
They need to be being like
perfectly straight,
constantly misted or something.
or your body is moving. Your physical body
Mhm.
changes its equilibrium with the movement of the ship. That's the
All right.
only one tiny. Otherwise, and that's a tiny, minuscule complaint. Otherwise, it was really great visual effects. Really great stuff.
I am curious about your guys' opinion of Caitlin. Did Valinor deliver the goods? We've heard about Valinor for 80 years in books and television. When that happened in episode 1, was it exactly what you always envisioned?
I think it was. I mean, it was. I definitely cried when I saw it, but then we were there for like 30 seconds. So it was kind of a letdown in that aspect. Like when we were in Valinor, I didn't want to leave and I wanted to be watching a First Age or a Years of the
Yes.
Trees show. And
Yep.
then it made me irritated that I was watching a Second Age show.
Yeah.
But like, yeah, visually, I thought it was really, really good.
Yeah. I wanted more than
Yeah.
just that one shot. Like I wanted
Yeah.
more of the trees. I wanted like I was a little bit bummed out that the most time we spent there was the conversation between Galadriel and Finrod, and it was just them kind of sitting behind a tree. Like I didn't think that was as like striking as the like big sweeping shot was. I wish we'd like flashed back there more. I don't know how that would have worked with a story, but I wish there was like more episodes where we kind of went back there, saw more of it. Just
Our spies have been telling us that they have assembled a writer's room for the first spin-off series of this show. Do you want that spin-off series to be about Finrod in the first age?
ooh, I could.
And
I would
I don't
watch that.
know.
I would watch
I'm
that.
too
Golfin.
scared to see
I want
any.
first age. So
I feel like his story intersects with Baron and Luthien too much, and I'm too scared to see Baron and Luthien. I don't
you
feel
don't
like
want them
they
to
should
touch Baron and
I just
Luthien?
don't. It's too special. Like
Mm.
they need to keep working on some other stuff first. Maybe in
Yeah.
like 40 years.
They
Maybe
got to
it's a
earn this.
spin-off.
Yeah,
Maybe it's
they
a spin-off
can't.
of the last season.
But in
rather
that
than
first
the
episode, when
season.
you saw the scars on Finrod's
Oh, no.
body, how many of you guys also thought that we might actually get to see the werewolf form of Sauron? Or is that
I
just
hope we
me?
do. I hope we do. I think that would be. I think that they should just like throw it in there for a little bit, and then later on, maybe we can see vampire Sauron just for fun. Just for
Right?
fun.
Theory, we have seen werewolf form of Sauron.
With the wolves, the 3 wolves.
Mm.
Hmm? Were are the 3 wolves the 3 witches?
That's what I thought,
I
but then
did
Yeah,
like
that
that
was-
theory.
I don't know.
Mm-hmm. I liked that theory too.
Again, why mystery box this, guys? Just give us some wins.
Like, just give us some information.
Yeah, like what, treat your viewer like we're smart. We can have a good time while still knowing things.
Yeah.
All right, next thing that should get a high grade: the music of Rings of Power.
Oh yeah.
Bear
plus.
McCreary.
A plus.
A
Easy.
plus.
A plus.
A plus.
for
A
sure.
A
plus.
plus. Yep.
A plus.
A plus across the
plus.
board. I'm not even gonna put that in
Mhm.
in the chat in the YouTube poll. The
He
chat room
killed
can
it.
just.
He did so good.
Yep.
What do you think of Howard Shore's title music?
It took me a while to warm up to it, but I eventually did, and I
Hmm.
love it. I love it.
Yeah.
Same. Yeah.
Do you want Howard Shore engaged a little more for season 2, or are we on Team Bear all the way?
I feel like Bear has proven himself
Yeah.
completely sufficient. Like he's competent. I feel like he can handle it.
Yeah.
I personally one of my the things I disliked about the Hobbit movies, the soundtrack, was there wasn't enough choral arrangements, vocal. The big men's chorus and women's chorus and children's choruses. We got so much of that
Mm-hmm.
in this season.
Like that Khazad Doom when those deep bass voices start, like that was everything I think you could ask for from like a dwarven theme.
Does he win an Emmy and a Grammy for this soundtrack?
Quite possibly nominations for
so.
sure. Lots of
hope so.
nominations for sure.
I hope throughout, at least at some point during the 5 seasons, I think that would be great. I don't know if
yeah.
he'll get it for the very first season just because it's so new, but maybe kind of as he goes. I imagine he'll be nominated like every season.
Mm-hmm.
We have been privileged enough to have many reunion shows these last couple of years about the Lord of the Rings movies with Peter Jackson. The music budget, was a big chunk. And so this is what we talk about when we say, why $1 billion? Where are they going to spend $1 billion on? Does a TV show deserve $1 billion? That a TV show has never sounded this good. And that's Amazon putting $1 billion to use. And please, obviously everyone wants to be more efficient in future seasons. But I do appreciate that Jennifer Salke, the head of Prime Studios, has said, look, it's going to cost what it cost for season 2. So they are still going to spend what it needs. And I hope they keep the budgets for
Yeah.
for the music. Now mixing, this is a category for basically the sound effects and how everything was put together on audibly in the show. Did you guys like the sound effects and the music? Did it feel like we were in the world? A couple points I want to bring out. This is probably the first fan-centric show to not use the Wilhelm screen. Thank you so much for not.
Yeah.
I mean, it's always been a meme, but we didn't need it and we didn't get it. So thank you. My
Well, because
complaint about
Peter Jackson used the Wilhelm scream over and over and over again.
yeah, but my only complaint about the mixing was I felt that the music was put forward too much in some critical scenes. Like they had the music doing too much work, and I lost some of the dialogue. And I almost feel like some of the scenes, establishing scenes and like middle scenes, were just kind of like, this music's too much. Like, let's just the pacing. Like, let's move on. Like, I don't need to hear an overture of Numenor for the 5th time.
Oh, come on! You love that stuff.
You don't?
Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong.
No,
So
there were some moments where it felt like the episode was about to end because of the way that the shot would be going with the music just drawing out for so long, that it did feel like it caused me to pause and be like, wait, is the episode over? And then it would just cut to another scene, which was then nice because the episode wasn't over, but it did feel a tiny bit weird.
I mean, that's the legacy of Peter Jackson and his 12 endings, right?
All the fade to blacks, like 12 fade to blacks.
Yeah.
Can you imagine if they had kept in Eowyn's wedding? Like, the fans would have loved
Even
it.
another fade to black.
More flowers. David, what did you think of the final mix? Did it sound like Middle Earth?
I mean, I honestly don't have much of an ear for most of it, and I don't want to grade something I'm not entirely. I mean, I was pleased by it. I mean, it was, or just kind of,
It sounded
down
like
the
it
middle.
should.
Yeah, it sounded like a TV show. So, like, or like how an HBO type of show could kind of be. I don't really have much of a far critical eye for the rest of that, or critical ear for the rest of that.
Yeah. So what do we say, Cliff? Solid B, solid A? Like, the mixing sounded.
I listened to the show, not on my regular television, but I listened to the show with isolated headphones. So I heard all of the stereo separation. I heard the arrows going by. I heard the sound mix, and it's great stuff. So I give it a big old A, a big old A+. It's really good stuff.
Caitlin,
That
as
seems
the
fair.
one that's put the most hours into this, and you're watching it in the background while you're doing stuff, like listening to it. Like, does it sound like Lord of the Rings?
I'm kind of the same as David. Like, I don't have a trained ear for like whether or not things sound the way they're supposed to, but I didn't really notice anything bad. So I would kind of just defer to Clifford over here.
All right. All right, we'll give it an A. This is great. All right, next, graphics and titles. And I have some exhibits.
Oh, good. Okay, here's where we talk about the Mordor title card, right?
Yeah, so
Yeah.
the Mordor title card.
Okay.
Let's see if I can bring that up. So before we get to Mordor, let's look at this. Okay, the title of the actual show is trash. Let's just say it. It's trash. Look at the titles of everything that has come before, and I put the two different Hobbit ones because the Hobbit logo on the very right is what was in the trailers and on the posters, right? But in the movie, it really felt like it should. So, like, I don't know, like, they'd spent all that effort making that, making that video, right? That title treatment that with the sand and everything like that, and it just looks off.
It almost felt like a PowerPoint presentation when it like turns and then it says the Rings of Power, and it's just it felt compared to all
very
of the
end.
sand and how intricate and special that seemed, for the text to come onto the screen like that, I just
Yeah.
felt like
Mm-mm.
what?
Mhm.
Yeah, it always it felt wrong. I wish they'd kept the same vibe as the like title announcement
Yeah.
video. I thought that one was so well done. I did warm up to the sand, but it felt a little too, it didn't feel very Lord of the Rings to me, I will say. Like it reminded me too much of just like any fantasy series. Like I got a lot of Westworld vibes from it, and I was like, I don't really want the like Westworld intro from Lord of the Rings.
Mm.
Yeah,
So
like it kind of like Wheel of Time is just stuff being woven, isn't it? And then this is just sand
or like
moving
the crown,
around.
like it kind of felt
Yeah,
like the
stuff
crown
dripping
where
on, or like
yes.
it just felt kind of like this is how every TV show is doing their intro. It's just a lot of
Yeah.
abstract imagery.
Yeah. It
But
felt
I
too modern.
once like there was an interview or something where they were talking about the inspiration behind the intro, and after that I was like, okay, I get it. I like it more. I
Yeah,
can
with like the
see where this is going,
sound, the
and it's
idling
grown on
delay.
me. But I feel like it could have been, if they would have, I don't know. I'm not in charge here, but
Yeah.
I
That
feel like
part,
it could
that
have been
part.
really cool in a different way, but I like this just fine.
The crazy
Yeah.
thing is they had all this budget for the best special effects, and the volcano looked real as real can be, and then you do this awesome little like audio wave effect that is obviously part of it was shot on a real thing, and then part of it was not. So like you know the question is on these graphics and titles, like it just stands out as less. I mean, this is almost it's almost as bad as the Avatar font on that big blue person movie. Like
Oh.
it's so basic. It's just so
Papyrus
basic.
font.
The papyrus font.
Yeah.
You know,
I thought you
like-
were about to slander The Last Airbender, and I was about to get really defensive.
oh no, not at all.
No.
I will say just
Look, that'll never
to
happen
their-
here because Appa is my spirit animal. It'll never happen on this show, okay? So,
But look how
trust.
real the sand looks all the way through. And I know some of this is CGI, especially that black snake of thing. That is all CGI.
Yeah.
It's photo real. You would not. That is the center of that ring is CGI. It blends in perfectly, and then it fades into papyrus.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
and this is the title. You have Howard Shore's music over this. How dare you treat Howard Shore's new music with the lowest quality, lowest effort title treatment you could possibly do?
Oh my gosh, Justin, that was so like extreme.
I will say I am glad though that
Bad.
they used the funding for it to go to other special effects rather than something that most viewers may just skip, since they have the skip intro function. Like if they had like I mean, as much as I wouldn't want them to go this route, I kind of would also want them to, if they did like the Game of Thrones where you get to see the different kingdoms around Middle Earth kind of being constructed like intro. But I would also maybe be rubbed the wrong way regarding that, just because it'd be too similar to it.
So literally, when it like this category is called graphics and text, and I
But
give it
I
a
think-
D. I give it a D on the title alone. And Cliff, you specifically wanted to talk about Mordor.
Well, I mean, I kind of like the idea that they had talked about the work of German physicist and musician Ernst Chladni, and he was the guy who created this interesting technology to use sound and vibrations to separate granules and see how they would make patterns based on sound. I mean, that was really intriguing. It's intriguing because conceptually, we know that Professor Tolkien's legends and the creation mythology behind it is based on music and sound. So that was an interesting, I mean, theoretically speaking, it was a very interesting approach to use that phenomenon known as cymatics to make those sound patterns appear.
And basing
It was intriguing. It was intriguing.
And
I'll
the
say.
title treatment based on music and sound, and you
Mhm.
know, the sound of the Ainur and everything. Like it's so
Mhm.
Tolkien. It's
Yeah.
so Tolkien. It's so perfect. And normies are never going to understand it.
Mhm.
Normal people are never going to appreciate it. It looks
Mhm.
dynamic enough to be like, okay, this is cool. I could get into this. And then the most basic font treatment, like they right clicked on a basic font and said, you know, emboss.
Times
And
New Roman.
oh, it's so bad.
Right.
But
Right.
that's just half of the graphics conversation. Cliff, you
Right.
wanted to talk about the Mordor.
The Mordor title card was something that should have been a beautiful and very emotive piece of dialogue from Adar.
Mhm.
He's
Yep.
such an intriguing character. He's the character who's behind all of this. Why not let that character, that beautiful actor, take his chance to inform the audience in a way that was more poetic, in a way that made us understand
Mhm.
his feelings. His feelings about the terraforming of Mordor. I would much have preferred that. But on the whole, I will say that the maps, all the flyovers of Middle Earth and all those maps, those were very useful. They had a utilitarian capacity that I think was very helpful for newbies and newcomers coming to the show.
Why did they
Really.
stop using them?
And then they stopped using them because we realized by episode 3 or 4 that there were no travel scenes except for the Harfoots wandering around. Everybody else in Middle Earth teleports. They teleport instantly to Linden or to Eregion.
I know.
They just teleport.
I got confused in episode 8 where they had just given up on the map concept, because like they're in this place, and then they cut to the king dying in Numenor, and then they cut to the tower exploding in Eregion, and I'm like, wait, did a Numenor tower just explode? They totally lost me.
Yeah.
Also, why do they make a big deal of like, what do you see as they come into Numenor Harbor? Like, what is it? What do you see? What is it? What do you see? What am I supposed to see? They never tell me what I'm supposed to see. Does
The
she
black
make
flags.
Is that what what the
Yes,
thing
that's what you're
is?
supposed to see. The king has died, so you're
The
supposed
banners,
to see
yeah,
the black
all-
flags.
All
Why
the
did it-
banners on
Because
flags.
Farazone said like 10 minutes earlier, oh, the black flags were for the harbor. And then you get to the harbor, and what's it full of? Black flags.
Mm-hmm.
Look, do you remember?
I'm
do you
an
remember,
idiot.
Look,
You have
no,
to
no,
tell
no.
me these things.
Look,
Writers.
No, I feel like you're very representative of the average viewer in this sense. Like most people are going to be super confused with a lot of stuff that's going on. I feel like it's almost an impossible show for them to make, because there's people who are just completely confused, and then there's us who are like, I can't believe they didn't add this extra thing. You know, like there's just no winning for them in a way. I don't know how they're going to make everyone happy.
I don't think they are.
Nerd of the Rings just joined the chat room. Hello, Matt, and says someone created a fan edit of the reveal of Mordor, where instead of text on screen like this, it pulls out to the map. It fades into the map, and the text on a map changes. If someone can find that link and put it in the chat,
Send it in the chat.
Yeah. I'm just so sad we didn't get to hear Adar say it, because he is
That was
like,
what I was
perfect, creepy
expecting.
voice. His
I
voice is so
Right.
cool. Just let him say it.
I wanted the like dramatic pause and
Yeah.
him to go like Mordor. Like
Yeah.
I want the dramatic effect, and then it was so anticlimactic.
or like I thought he was gonna workshop it, like you know, kind of like. or play it for confidence and be like, this has always been his plan. It was always going to be called Mordor. It does set up earlier in the episode where Morgoth's ultimate plan is or Sauron's plan was like, if Morgoth gets defeated, go here, do this thing, and let the orcs live. Right. So they do set that up with like, you know, the history of the maps and like, oh my gosh, these are the plans. So maybe it was always going to be called Mordor. Like, but him not saying it, again, an unnecessary mystery box. Come on, guys. Just ugh.
The text changing was just so goofy too. I
It,
saw
like the
another
way it
fan
like
edit,
burned away.
when Halbrand is going back into Mordor, it says Halbrand on the screen, and then it changes Sauron.
Oh, you know what? That's funny. That's funny. And you know what? That's absolutely, that is the logic they presented. It is now illogical that they didn't do that with Halbrand. That's funny.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Lavenda
I
in the
love it.
Lavenda in the chat room says, "Is that really a mystery box?" Let me explain it. It is a mystery box because now we don't know how the name Mordor came to be.
Mm-hmm.
We don't have any hint of whether it was come up on the fly or this is like he's always known this name, or like we just they've mystery boxed why it's called Mordor. They
Yeah.
just put it on screen.
But we know at some point next season, possibly early next season, somebody is going to say Mordor, and there's going to be no explanation for how they know that's what it's called.
Yeah.
Say it.
You're right.
Yeah, they're like
That's
putting
gonna
like
happen.
signposts.
Did you talk to Adar? Like, did somebody like did a cartographer just start passing out pamphlets? Like, please note this place has now changed. Like,
Can you imagine? Can you imagine Halbrand walking down, saying, "What's up, Adar?" And he's like, "You called it what?"
You know, I know this is hilarious, but I can hear Adar in my head saying, looking up at the sky and talking to the other orcs around him and saying, "We are no longer without our own home. We're no longer without our own land. We have our own land of shadow." Imagine him just saying that. Land of shadow, which is the direct translation from Elvish of what Mordor means.
Well, Galadriel says that in the episode earlier.
She does. Yeah, she does.
But like, no one's gonna know that except us.
Yeah.
Yep, right. Dr. Nosey's in the chat room, who's had some wonderful threads on Twitter about the lore. But
I'm
Dr.
so
Nosey
glad
wants,
you're here, Dr. Nosey. Hello.
They want to remind us that Mordor literally means dark lands in
Dark
Elvish.
lands. Yeah. Okay. That's a much better than my literal translation. It's not land of shadow, but Professor Tolkien, perhaps these colloquial expressions of the land of shadow is something that developed in the elven histories as the elves wrote it down.
All right. Well, all right. So we have to give this a grade for graphics. So I've made my case. Graphics and titles, I hate them. I hate all of them. D, solid D. I'm so that is mine. Let's go around the table. David.
I may have to hop off after this one. Just I know we're at the last one, but I gotta get somewhere.
That's fine.
Yeah. But thank you guys for having me on. I will say my final grade on this one. Probably just. I mean, again, I don't feel comfortable grading it, but probably just a C.
C.
Okay. And before you leave, what's the marketing from you, David? Before you leave, what's your marketing?
I'd probably say a C as well. I'm still iffy on that one. I mean.
Right.
Yeah, they decked out all of Comic-Con with it, so there's that bonus side, but yeah.
Yeah, but did they tell us the truth about the show that they were giving us? Okay. Thank you, David Chambers, for being with us. We'll let you go.
Well, thank you all for having me on. It's good talking with all of you.
Yeah, bye.
Yeah, it's a pleasure. All right, now, Caitlin, what about the market, the graphics grade that you think?
I gave it a C, just a solid C.
Mm-hmm. A solid C. I loved the maps. I loved the maps.
Yeah.
And I don't have the same problems with the opening title that Justin has. The only problem I have is with that really insulting moment. That it was kind of insulting to the intelligence of most of the fans. That's the only problem I have, that title card for Southlands.
And it was just such a missed opportunity. I feel like that's the same with the title sequence too, especially when we had this really, really cool Forging of the Rings sequence that they had released in like January. Like, what are they like? Did they just do that for this one thing? They could have used it for the title, and I would have been extremely happy because it was so cool and practical, and just it's about the rings.
The molten metal, all that molten.
Yep.
Yeah, that
it was
good.
so cool.
I would have been fine if they reused that. Like that wouldn't. I wouldn't have made me mad.
Yeah, that it just felt like a lot of missed opportunities with the graphics and titles. Like, not that the ones that ended up are super bad, but it just felt like they could have done it differently pretty easily, it seems.
Yeah, I think I'm gonna go with C as well. because I don't hate them. I don't think they're ugly or so terrible, but I think there's a lot of room for improvement.
All right, I think I found it. I think I found this thing. Let me play it.
Uh-oh, is this what Matt, Nerd of the Rings, was talking about?
You can imagine the audio.
Okay.
What shall we call it?
Mm-hmm.
He smiles like Thanos.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, we get happy at our.
Mm-hmm.
What? Yeah, that's so cool.
Oh. See, that
What?
it accomplishes
Why
the
didn't they
same
give us
thing.
that?
It accomplishes the same thing. It's literally the same concept. It's just done way better. Like
Yeah.
way more tastefully. Like it's
Really, really
Mm.
cool.
that other one was so cheesy and like I don't know, it's really off-putting for some reason.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
perfect.
Yeah.
That one is really,
so-
really cool. Whoever made that, like, they did a
yeah,
great job.
props to them because that's really
Yep.
good.
Yeah.
All
Yeah,
right,
indeed.
Cliff, we've got a C, a C, a C, and a D minus for me. What is your final thing? The chat. I should say YouTube gave it a solid B.
Yeah, the
Oh.
graphics are a B from me. It would have been. I
Mhm.
love the maps. I love the flyovers.
Yeah.
I love them. They're great. And I knew what they're for. I know the utility that they have. But
Mhm.
yeah, I have to take it from an A down to a B because of that weird thing in that ending episode. Anyway, but that's it. I think it's a B.
Wow.
All right,
We
so
were meaner than the chat this time. That's rare.
the maps. All right, so do we? Let's give this a B minus because I'm
That's
a
fair.
very particular gripe, and I know I shouldn't weight my very very unhappiness. But the chat room seems to like the maps and the graphics, and they were okay with things. So
Yep.
we're just gonna give this a B
That's
minus.
Yeah, I'm good with that.
All right, marketing. We added this category to this show, and it wasn't on the midterms because the people here were part of the marketing campaign. You know, we got flown out to London and we got to tour Oxford and see Tolkien things, and we got to go to premieres in New York and in London and everything like that. And we had a Comic-Con party. We did a bunch of stuff. So, guys, like. And gals, you had a great time in marketing. But the people on the internet are like, marketing was kind of a fail. Like, you know, the general consensus I see on Reddit and on Twitter is that marketing just really didn't set the show up, the show as it's made. The marketing didn't do a good job of setting up what we were about to get.
I've seen some people go as far as saying that it was a bait and switch.
I don't know if
It did feel like that at times, I think. I wouldn't maybe say that, but I could sympathize with it in a tiny way. I guess I don't know.
I wouldn't say it either, but I do understand why some people feel that way about it being a bait and switch. But
I will give I will give credit that Amazon put the biggest budget in television history on the show, $1 billion budget season 1. Crazy, like insane, and that trickled down into some cool Lord of the Rings influencers, and they didn't invite, you know, the YouTube boxers and the Minecraft Twitchers and, you know, the people that have 20 million followers, the Kardashians and, you know, whoever else to all of these cool fancy events. Like, you can imagine some of these, you know, people with 30 million followers, you know, going to Oxford and be like, oh man, this is freaking rad, you know. They instead marketing targeted actual Tolkien fans and influencers. Is such a weird word for us to say.
It's so weird.
It felt like marketing took a fans first approach, and they're to be commended. Like, they identified who needs to be treated well and who needs to be brought along on this adventure and who can help tell our story, the story that they wanted to tell. and I think we all played our part, and I had a great time.
Mhm.
And I think to that end, the marketing was good.
Yeah, I think it was really cool of them to kind of reach
Yeah.
out their hand and bring Tolkien fans along for this
Mhm.
journey rather than keeping us all in the dark, especially like I know like I'm not like Corey Olsen, like like people
Yeah.
like him. I feel like
Mhm.
it makes total sense, but then I thought it was also really cool that they did include people that don't have as massive as a following as
Yeah.
he does.
Yeah.
And I feel like they included a pretty big range of people in
Mhm.
the groups that we were able to be a part of. So I thought that it was really nice of them, I guess,
Mhm.
and um, just I think it was a good way of starting things out and building a relationship with the fans because then we can go back and tell all of our followers like here's kind of what our experiences with the show has
Mhm.
been, and so that was really neat and unique. I thought it was
Yeah.
pretty cool.
Yeah. No, I mean, I feel like I I have no idea why I was invited and constantly questioning my credentials, I guess. But no, I think they did a good job of reaching out across like demographics and like globally they picked a lot of, it wasn't like they just picked people from, you know, LA or from London. Like they did a good job of kind of spreading the love, I think. And yeah, I think it was a brave and kind of bold move to for us to be the first ones that they introduced this stuff to because like you Justin, you were saying they easily could have paid real influencers money to go do this stuff and say and spread it to far more of like a general casual audience, um to say, hey, this is what we did, but they picked old guys and people who are really into Tolkien and aren't traditional influencers. And I think it was brave of them because I mean we easily could have all hated it as soon as we saw anything and um kind of alienated from that more intense fan base. So
And they invited hundreds of fans in Mexico City,
yeah,
in India, in Mumbai,
yeah.
I think,
I was
in
I was
London.
surprised that they did
Lo-
that many premieres and in the places that they did them, like LA and London weren't surprising, but I was
Mm-hmm.
impressed that they pulled out all the stops for all those too. It wasn't like, London necessarily got the best treatment. Like I feel like all the other ones were really well decorated. They still had like the same kind of, I guess, benefits for each of the premieres. I feel like in terms of like the social media marketing, like out at times felt out of touch with what we were seeing in the show. Like there's that one video that was like very like Halbrand Galadriel, like it made it seem like super romantic and everybody was like, what's happening? Like
Yeah, I was stressed out, and
I
then
don't
look
think
what
they did.
happened.
Yeah, I know. But I feel like they could have done the like social media releases a little bit better. And like what they did in February was sending all of us those hand posters. I thought was really cool. That was like my first foray into working with them, and I thought that was cool enough. So getting to like go to London and New York was something I definitely didn't expect it, but I wish they might have done something more like the hand posters along
was
the
that
way.
was that cool though? Because I feel like like they didn't tell us the context. It's like
Right.
it's like it's almost insulting our intelligence. Like it's okay to tell us the character names, who these
Uh-huh.
hands belong to.
Yeah.
I feel like there was a
I
level
think
of
it
like,
was I think it was to generate my one thing is
Mm-hmm.
the timing of all of it. Like we only got them 10 minutes before they just dropped to everybody. Like I feel like maybe it had been a couple hours or something like that. It might have been a little bit more effective in generating like clicks to our pages and also like conversation about it. Yeah, I hope that they learn from some of the mistakes and kind of observe the feedback on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook and everything and maybe course correct some of the marketing for next season, because I feel
Did,
like it could be a lot better than what it was.
so what wasn't better? Like what wasn't good? Were the trailers not good?
Yeah,
What?
like the amount there was towards the end, I just stopped watching the trailers because I was like, there's so many, and there was a lot, especially like the day before episodes would drop, they would put those previews, and some of them were pretty heavily
Spoilers.
spoilery. I was like, I don't know if that necessarily helps people to watch if they're getting spoiled by the preview. I just know a lot of people had issues with that. Like some of the accounts that I follow were like warning people like, "Hey, I saw this trailer or the preview or whatever it was, and it's kind of got some spoilers in it. So if you kind of want to go in blind, you probably shouldn't watch those." Um, yeah, I
Yeah,
don't
I thought
know.
that was a weird choice. Like,
Yeah.
why would you spoil your own show?
Yeah, yeah. So just like little things like that. Like obviously I still like I still feel like their outreach was good to all of us, but just the stuff that like that didn't involve us, that was the
Did it
just the
feel
posts on social
that?
media.
Did the marketing feel like it was a part of the show?
No, that's what I mean. Like it felt like disconnected. It felt like the two departments weren't communicating with
Yeah.
each other. Like I felt like the marketing department just like
Really?
got the clips and put them together, and like it didn't match up with like the vibe of the episode, or I don't know, maybe they were just trying to get clicks, and like the like with the whole Galadriel Halbrand thing, like it being like drawing in the Galbrand crowd, I guess. I don't know, I'm not sure. I just feel like it wasn't, I don't think it was bad. I think it was pretty good, but I feel like
Why do you
there's room
think,
for
Caitlin?
improvement.
Wait. Why do you?
I feel like when I'm talking to the showrunners, I'm getting a completely different story
Mm,
than when I'm watching the marketing. Like, or
mm-hmm.
when I would go to read an article that comes out about the show,
Yeah.
it felt like two separate things were happening.
Mm-hmm.
And that created a lot of weird tension for me, because then I'm like, well, what's the truth here? And how am I playing a part in this? Because they keep inviting me to things and I have to say, just trust me, guys. I really had a great time, but I'm not allowed to tell you anything about it.
Right.
And then a trailer comes out or a clip comes out that's like completely contrary to what I just experienced. So
Yeah.
then it makes me look really fishy. So that
Right.
was really uncomfortable. Uh, and
And I
then,
think that's what happened with the super fans, the infamous super
Mm-hmm.
fans videos. That
Mm-hmm.
they invited a bunch of fans out, flew them all out like they did us to London, to Mallorca.
Mm-hmm.
They filmed like an hour and a half long conversation. Like it was a
Mm-hmm.
long video, and it was catered and everything like that. But they took 67 minutes of a conversation about fans geeking out about how cool the trailer is, and condensed it into 3.5 minutes of nothing about Tolkien. And it just felt like it was off. Yeah. So I guess the question is, do you feel like that we're looking at the report card here, the writing, the pacing, the fidelity, all got poor things, but should the showrunners be involved in the marketing? And
I
Hmm.
feel like there needs to be conversations happening
Mm-hmm.
between the visionaries for the
Mm-hmm.
show and the people who are supposed to be
Yeah.
spreading the word. Because if your marketing is about getting the word out, you need to talk to the people who have the word. And it felt like, with so much secrecy surrounding the show, it was almost like the people who were creating, like whoever's editing this trailer doesn't even know what's happening in it. Or like
Yeah.
when we had the cover with Galadriel on the magazine cover,
Mm-hmm.
and the editing in that photo makes her look really dull, where elves are supposed to be kind of like glowy and ethereal.
Yeah.
And you're looking at it thinking, this doesn't look like Galadriel. Not that one, the other one where
oh
it's just Galadriel sitting. And like
oh
it's
yeah,
just like there's nothing
Yeah.
wrong with the costuming. It's
Yeah.
the editing. And so
Yeah.
you can tell that whoever was editing that photo was kind of in the dark.
Yeah.
And so with so much secrecy surrounding everything, I felt like it
Mhm.
wasn't able to translate, and they
Yeah.
weren't able to like effectively communicate. And I
Yeah.
feel like they did a lot of weird things that kind of led you to believe that this was going to be an adaptation, like the book covers, the tie-in book covers. Like
oh
we
yeah.
still, like, why is Adar on the Return of the King? It
Yeah.
still doesn't make any sense to me.
It makes even
And
less
it's like
sense now.
Elrond
Right,
is on
and
the Two
so
Towers one, and he's not even
Elrond,
in
yeah.
that book at all. I don't think. Like,
And Galadriel's not a war. It's like, okay, now we know now that little dagger she's holding in the picture doesn't even exist anymore. So why is
Yeah.
that on the cover of the Fellowship? Like,
yeah,
and putting their posters on the tie-in covers kind of leads you to have this. It kind of implies that they're connected.
These
yeah.
are cool
Like,
though.
so
I love those. Yeah,
yeah, that's a cool box. I don't have any cool boxes like that. But
Yeah.
like, they
Wait,
did things like
Didn't
that.
you get a Rings of Power Echo or something? Alexa?
Yes, it's listening to me right now.
yeah.
Just
taking
Uh,
notes
here.
Cliff, we haven't had a chance to hear your thoughts. Cliff and I got invited to when they were making the title treatment. That was like the first thing ever, right? When they showed us the title for the first time. And I don't know, Cliff, what was your thought? Because I walked away from that thinking they're spending a lot of money on just the title. And my first question to them is like, oh, this is the title sequence for the show. They're like, oh no, this is just marketing. I'm like,
So sad.
Yeah, that was a remarkable thing to witness in person, being at the forge, and to feel the closeness and the intensity of the heat from the
Mhm.
forge. It was all very cool. And it was dangerous to the crew. It was dangerous to the equipment because they were moving this high-end camera very close, swooping down to the molten metal. It was so
Oh
cool.
my gosh, yeah.
And after all that effort, they didn't even use it for the opening of the show. Ironically, it's ironic, I think. Thanks, Alanis. But I think that the overall grade that I'm going to give for the marketing should also be split. Like a lot of people in the live chat are very accurate in saying before Comic-Con, it was one level of marketing.
Mhm.
Post Comic-Con, things got very, very different and revved up a lot. And I heard a little birdie landed on my windowsill and told me that Amazon Studios, that Prime Video got rid of the earlier marketing vendor and hired a whole new team. So that's why everything
See, and
evolved and changed in the marketing.
the like I like the post Comic-Con marketing less. I felt like it started to get
Yeah.
very muddled. And that was where I started feeling like what we experienced, speaking to the showrunners from some of us multiple times, was not matching up with what we were seeing. And it's like I don't think the marketing department is totally in control. Like I think there's a lot of different aspects at play with what we can and can't say. But like, yeah, the very intense secrecy, I think, crippled them just a little in terms of our effectiveness, because it was very much the like it was great, we trust that, like we could be solid examples. And then once those examples did start coming out, like with Rob, who read all the books and would hold the like book clubs and all that stuff, like I feel like if we had been able to kind of say some of that stuff sooner, and that stuff wasn't so like it just wasn't marketed as much as the other stuff, and I feel like it should have been. Like the showrunners either need to be involved with the marketing, and we need to have their like what they feel and think about the show it evident in the marketing, or like not at all. But like we're kind of in this weird middle ground that makes it harder for us and makes it
yeah,
confusing
I
for audiences.
I almost didn't want to have this conversation because I'd love a set visit for season 2, filming at Bray Studios in London, 45 minutes southwest of London. Right now.
Do you have the exact MapQuest direction?
Over the next 6 weeks.
Do you know exactly how to get there from Heathrow?
It is 2 trains away from Heathrow.
Oh my gosh.
But I think there is a balance, right? Like access. I think Amazon said, look, treat the fans right, because they come first, and we want to be your biggest champions on this show. We really do, and we want to champion Tolkien in the whole pop culture sphere, and then doing all these events and getting all this access and seeing all these things, and then zip for like still zipped. There are things I still can't talk about, and it's like the show's out. like the show's out now. Can we talk about that thing that happened on set that one day with the thing when the person there was like, it's like I feel like Amazon. This goes back to the mystery boxes. It's like, you guys, like, it's okay to say, hey, we met Gandalf on set. Cool.
I think that would create so much more buzz if going forward. I do hope now that the giant secret Sauron has been revealed, I hope that there will be less secrecy,
a little less
because
like
being
tight
able, like,
with everything.
Even just for anyone who's experiencing anything to do with the show to be able to talk about it, like, that's kind of the whole point of marketing. And I think, you want to be able to share your experience, like, because
like,
I really love the show, and it's been so cool to be involved in this little way. And so, like, I want to be able to share that. And so I would hope kind of going forward that the marketing maybe would shift a little bit from the direction it's going in now.
Yeah.
I remember,
and like, that's what gets views like that. I mean, if you like, especially on TikTok, where I do most of my content, is like to be able to be like, oh my gosh, I went and saw this cool, like, that's what gets the views. Like, doing a way after the fact kind of really tight-lipped
high level,
video, like that isn't going to get the pull from the algorithm that, like, oh my gosh, this exciting thing just happened and here's all the details. Like, people want the tea, they want the deets, like, they want to see, like, oh my gosh, this person just did this exciting thing. Like, I see it all the time on my For You page and on Twitter and Instagram. And I think,
look, I just remember back in The Hobbit, like, we all have our opinions of Battle of the Five Armies and the butter scraped over too much bread opinion of the Hobbit trilogy. But on the third movie, Warner Brothers sent like 100 fans to New Zealand. It was like the big Hobbit fan contest, right? Fan fellowship contest or something like that. It was, that's fun. Fans want to be included. They want to be around for the ride. If Amazon is building a big set up in Scotland, a big outdoor set, and there's an opportunity to fly 100 or 200 fans from around the world to visit a place from Middle Earth, that will go so far. Be like, oh my God, we, fans around the world entered a contest and won a trip. And this is stuff only the most expensive TV show in history could do. It's like, you've got all the money in the world. The studio exec has said, we'll spend whatever it takes. So spend it on the music, spend it on these visual effects, spend it on the acting and the writing, but spend it on the fans. It's all part of, one thing. So I've got the poll up on YouTube. Was marketing good? And they gave it a solid B.
Really?
Do we like that? Was this a well-marketed show, like any other tentpole and/or Game of Thrones, Marvel, Star Wars? Like, when it comes to marketing, what's your initial grade? Just off the top of your head, do you give it a B?
B minus.
I'd give it a B minus. Yeah, that was the first thing that popped in my head.
I give them a C initially, but I feel like it needs to be a 2-part, because I feel like with the outreach, they did do a very good job. But it was just when it came to the ads we're seeing on social media, the tie-in book covers, a lot of it ended up, I think, being more confusing than helpful.
Yeah.
Fair enough. I do appreciate
solid assessment.
I really, and thank you. Yes, that's a very solid observation. I appreciate what we were talking about a few minutes ago, that they did so many fan screenings in some major cities around the world. And that's really cool. And, nobody else in a big streaming series has done that. There's no Book of Boba Fett that did that with fan screenings.
No.
Sandman didn't
Star
do
Wars
it.
shows.
Nobody's done that, right? And even though, like, wow, well, like, we were really responding to all these other TV series, the Rings of Power did go out of their way to do some interesting things. But in my humble opinion, all the hands over the torsos posters without names being attached to them, that was just frustrating. That just became
Mm.
ultimately frustrating to me. That's all. Overall, it was like a lot of the show. The marketing was a mixed bag, just like a lot of the show itself, I think.
I will hold the B minus, but I will say my final thought on marketing: absolute disgrace that the Ents in the trailer and the Balrog in the trailer and all the cool things that you know that we want to see in the trailer are only trailer moments. They had no
Yeah.
bearing on the plot whatsoever.
Right.
Zero
It's
bearing on it.
disappointing.
I mean, we've got a lot more
had time.
seasons. They're just
want more
setting. They're
ends.
setting up everything.
They're writing checks. Their ego's writing checks. Their marketing is writing checks, and they're marketing by showing all those things that they know we would love in the trailers, and then not having anything in the show that has to do with those things was just like you overpromised on a show. Of course you needed to put the Balrog in the Comic-Con trailer. Of course you did.
Yeah, that
But-
was so cool, though. I mean, that moment when cause I was sitting next to Clifford, wasn't I? When we saw that, and you like jumped out of your seat, like
Oh my
literally
God.
flew across the room, and I was like, it was so cool. And then,
Yeah.
when we saw it in the shows,
It was just
It was
that. It
less-
was just that one.
it was
clip.
less effective in the context of the show than it was in the trailer.
It was
Mhm.
in that early trailer moment. Was
The
because-
Morgoth
Yeah,
shadow.
the Morgoth shadow over the trees
Mhm.
was great.
And then the show was just part of the intro montage, which was
Yep.
Yeah, and
I wish
like
was
the,
more.
Yeah, I get
the
it.
Balrog didn't do anything, and the Ents don't like you didn't. You had 8 hours on season 1. You could give us one little scene of a subtitled Ent talking to its Entling, saying "There is a shadow, I feel it," or something like that. You know,
That scene would take 45 minutes.
That would have wasted so much time.
We already.
You're mad
We
about the
don't-
pacing and
yeah,
that
we
you
don't
want an
need
Ent
another
speaking.
Thing to jump.
All right.
We don't need to jump
All
back
right.
and forth between the Ent timeline as well.
Maybe
I
that's
have
what the
that's-
spinoff is about.
That's funny. That you guys are funny. That's
I have.
funny.
All
I
right,
love
so overall, an overall grade. Like if this is the one that goes on the poster. This is the one that ends up in the TV commercial. 4 stars. 2 and this is the overall grade for the overall show. And before we get there, I have one more clip to show you. Yes, that is butterflies coming out of not Gandalf, just like Doctor Strange makes butterflies out of his enemy. So why butterflies? Is it meant to foreshadow the butterfly saving Gandalf at the top of Orthanc?
Well, that's a great non-canonical moment that Tolkien never wrote. The whole Gandalf talking to a moth and then him talking to the moth again at the Return of the King. That never happened. It just never happened. So I don't know why would they lean into that now as a visual? I don't know.
I think it's kind of a foil to the fireflies dying moment. So the fireflies, they light up and he accidentally kills them. And then in this moment, it's the butterflies, no light. That was how I rationalized it.
Okay.
Also, side note from the butterflies, this is the first time we've seen a Shadow Realm figure not in the Shadow Realm. If you remember, we only see Shadow Realm people when Bilbo or Frodo has the ring on.
The ring.
So no one has a ring because it's not invented yet. So how are we seeing these shadow figures already? That makes no sense in the lore. All right, so that's my final criticism on this show.
Okay.
What
All right.
What is the overall show? Look, we are privileged this year to have so much great television. We had the final season of Better Call Saul, Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon was an amazing first season. Andor is shaping up to be something really special.
Awesome.
It's
Yes.
really good.
Yes, it
but
is.
all
And the Sandman as well, which caught everyone's
Sandman.
attention. Now it is a truth, unfortunately, that now the Rings of Power, as it is not only being compared to Peter Jackson's previous films, but now as a piece of large-scale fantasy television, it's also instantly under the shadow of the Sandman. and House of the Dragon, and to
Mhm.
another degree, Andor,
Hmm.
which is exceptionally good.
Mhm.
Exceptionally good. So, overall, it's a mixed bag. I would say that the overall grade, compounding or amalgamating all of these grades that we have right here, final grade. Did Rings of Power make a best effort? I'll give them. I don't know whether to give them a B or a C.
I think it's a solid B. Look,
Yeah.
it's from the overall production, nobody skimped. They made decisions, they made choices, and projected them
Their
full
whole
throated.
chest. Yeah.
That
Mhm.
whole chest.
I can respect that.
Like they did not back off any decision when they
Mm-mm.
chose to do something. They put the best of Bear McCreary forward. They put all of their special effects behind it.
Mhm.
They did that.
Mhm.
Even the title treatment of Mordor. They did that.
They
They even
committed.
they committed to burning the text.
Yeah,
Like
Yep.
there's a tweet. We got a really interesting tweet from one of our friends in the larger circle of Tolkien fandom. Their Twitter handle is White Cachalot Erendil, and
Mm.
he said the Rings of Power is a really good TV show slash production, probably going to be the TV phenomenon of the decade. I say this wholeheartedly. Is it necessarily Tolkienian or a good Tolkien adaptation? No. I genuinely think it rather comes alive as a Tolkien based sensational fantasy, rather. That's an interesting counterpoint and a very
Mhm.
interesting way to articulate it, I
well,
think.
let's start there, Caitlin. Is this a Tolkien TV show?
So the way that I've always approached it is that it's a retelling of Tolkien's myth.
Mm.
Um, I like you could compare it to like Tolkien is like the great Greek myths, and then you
Mhm.
get, every single other version of them going down the line
Mhm.
nowadays. And so I feel like it's based in Tolkien's myth, but it's its own thing. This is a
Yeah.
new version of Middle Earth. So
Mhm.
there's no use in saying, well, that's not in the books, because you're just going to be grumpy and angry.
Mhm.
And that's not what that's I don't think that's what they set out to do. If they did set out to do that, I have some questions because
Right.
the choices that they've made lead me to believe that they are telling
Mhm.
their own version. This is just Tolkien wrote his myth, and this is a
Yeah.
new thing.
Yeah.
So I would agree with Arendelle.
Yeah. I I think it's a little bit too early to say definitively if it is a good Tolkien adaptation or not. I think I personally am going to wait a little bit to render that judgment. I do think it's a modern retelling. It's like, you don't sit down and watch 10 Things I Hate About You and expect it to be like Shakespeare, or you don't sit down and watch Clueless and get mad that it's not exactly like Emma. Like, you have to
Wait,
take it
what
within the
is
context.
that?
Yeah,
What?
Clueless is like a modern retelling of Emma by Jane Austen.
Mm.
God.
Yeah.
You
So
learn something new
it's
every day.
it's for current and future audiences. And as somebody who has like loves Tolkien and has read all the books and seen all the movies and read the Silmarillion a bunch of times, um, I don't necessarily think the books themselves are enough to sustain the legacy. Like I think as time goes on, they get harder and harder for younger audiences to read. Um, so I'm fine with this being a modern, taking it with a grain of salt and not getting bogged down with if it's super duper accurate, and kind of understanding that some things are bad changes, some things don't necessarily need to be changed, but I think generally just being okay with the fact that they're telling their story and they are keeping it in mind, with Tolkien, and also keeping, current and future audiences in mind
If
as well.
if we are to believe the interviews, and it does get further confirmed that this
Mm.
is Simon Tolkien himself imprinting his own legacy. It's his
Mm.
turn on the Legendarium.
Mm.
And this every decision in the show is Simon's, with Simon's approval or Simon's guidance. If this is truly the next phase of the Legendarium from the hand of the Tolkien family, does this change your perspective going into season 2?
It just makes me think, I wish Christopher Tolkien were still alive. That's all I'm thinking of.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's hard. Yeah, because I mean,
Mhm.
that's just, it's kind of like this is what happens to the great tales. Like they're going to be retold down the line as the years go on. But the nice thing with Tolkien is that we do always have the books. It's not like, back in the day before they had written books where stories would change as they go. Like we can always go back to
Yeah.
Tolkien himself
Yeah.
with the books.
And
But
I
it's
don't
fun to go back to Middle Earth in this new way.
Yeah. And I don't think, despite what many trolls like to believe, I genuinely, like, with my whole heart, don't believe that they are intentionally trying to destroy Tolkien's legacy. I don't think they are intentionally trying to not pay respects to the original works. Like, I don't think they sat down and decided to make the most blasphemous, inaccurate version of Tolkien's story. I think you can agree to disagree on if their efforts were successful, and I think there's room for debate in there for sure. But I don't think the debate is on if they're trying to destroy Tolkien intentionally. I think it's just in the debate on whether or not, for you personally, it is successful.
I do like some of these comparisons that some of these writers and Twitterers have been saying, is that we all know what happens to every Shakespearean character, but it doesn't make the new version of Macbeth any less, or new versions of Emma or anything. It's like, and maybe my biggest frustration with this show, both from the marketing to the events to the actual show itself and the pacing of the show, is it's never about secrecy. Like, we will have a better time, if you just stop keeping secrets and just focus on telling a story.
Yeah, just tell a good story, because that's what Tolkien did. He tells you about the Silmarils, and then he's immediately like, well, and then they got lost. The Silmarils were made. Oh, but they've been lost.
Yeah.
But
And
let
he's
me
an
still tell you the
unreliable,
story.
yeah. He's
Like-
not claiming to know everything. He's kind of like an unreliable narrator.
And he constantly was rewriting Galadriel until his final days. He was constantly rewriting everything about Galadriel, and Christopher really had. That's why it took Christopher 5 or 7 years to finally put together the Silmarillion after his dad's death, because the notes were just this way or that way, and some of the things that Christopher chose to edit in to his books. Some people will say that Tolkien disavowed that line of reasoning on something. So we're open to interpretation. Tolkien was open to interpretation, and we're ready to go on whatever adventure. And this season was a great first pass. It feels like a first pass. I'm not fully engaged in all the storylines. I don't feel that this is completely Middle Earth. I feel like the differences and the disparities visually between the different races of Middle Earth are not portrayed as well as it could. But these are all things that can improve. But having a solid B, this show is not a failure in the slightest. But Cliff, you are on the front lines. You produced a documentary, Ringers, Lord of the Fans. You've been on the front lines of the OneRing.net since the very first. So you've seen fandom from the beginning. What is your official take on your official score on Rings of Power Season 1?
I could give you a different score on the state of fandom right now, but let's save that as a conversation for another day. That would be a really enriching conversation. We'll grade the state of the fandom. But right now, overall, I've got to say there's a comparison to be made with Star Trek: The Next Generation. First season of TNG was a little bit wobbly, but they introduced great characters. They introduced really solid setups, and they built, the foundations of what would become a much, much greater show that had a great evolutionary process with the producers and the writers figuring out what did work and what did not work. And maybe the Rings of Power could also be an analog to Star Trek The Next Generation, that they have a first season, which is very promising, really cool, and delightful. I mean, it's like everybody was like, oh, we're going back to the Enterprise. We're going back to Star Trek.
Why are we talking about Sandman and Star Trek? Like, let's stay on Rings.
Because it is a legacy property. It is a legacy intellectual property. That's why. And we're an audience in the seat watching our televisions thinking we're going back to this legacy storytelling of Middle Earth. What are they going to do with it? And I think it is a reasonably good start, even though there's a couple of legs on the table that are a little bit wobbly. I still think they've got a lot of promise. And if they stop with the unnecessary mystery boxing, and if they stick a lot harder into the actual intrigue and the stuff that's in the appendices, especially with Anatar and the genuine story of Anatar, you know what? I think they might be able to get somewhere in the end. Oh, Caitlin, can we give a grade to the sound mixing in the back of Justin's room?
Poor Justin.
Emily, maybe we could give a special audio mixing grade for whatever is happening there in Justin's house. All right.
But, never mind. Never mind. All right. So we've got a solid B that YouTube has determined 49% of the vote is a solid B. I think we're all there. Like, it's a good start. So looking at this report card, it's not straight A's. There is room for improvement. I've said my piece on where you can improve mostly. Caitlin, do you have parent-teacher conference? What does Daddy need to do to help his son improve?
They need to spend a lot more time with Adar. He's the coolest character in the whole series. If they kill him off right away, I'm gonna be so mad. That's really my number one piece of advice. And I need to go feed my baby, so I'm gonna have to get off of the call now.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Thank you so much, Caitlin, for joining us on this report card show.
Thank you guys for having me.
Yes.
Follow her at Tea with Tolkien on all the things. All right, Emily.
Really, really great to have you here, Caitlin, and lovely to have you here. And thanks for being with us for a long version of our show tonight. Thank you for doing
that. Thank you. This is great.
Yes. And
all right,
yes.
Emily, final thoughts. Parent-teacher conference. How can the parents help their child improve?
Okay, I think more episodes where we jump around less next season, kind of sticking with. I mean, I think some skipping around is good, but maybe not as much. I think not going with the cheesy dialogue slash titles, and I think just having a clearer, maybe more cohesive goal with the marketing and not having it feel so disjointed, which could be because, like Cliff said, they switched marketing teams halfway through. But yeah, I mean, I think Varking said it in the YouTube chat, like only 20% of the story has been told. We're just at the very beginning. I don't want to cast too harsh of judgments on things that are not complete yet, because we saw that happening even episode to episode, and stuff that was happening before the show came out, and with trailers. Like, I know with the like Galadriel line about like from the Golden House, in the trailer they'd cut that line off, and then in the show she said of Finarfin, and I feel like people tend to jump the gun online because you can just give your opinion at any moment of the day at any time. So
right.
I feel like there's been a little bit of jumping of the gun in the criticisms, and I don't know, we could talk about the state of the fandom another time, but Yeah, I'm comfortable with giving it a B. I think there's room for improvement, but I don't think it's the failure that the haters wanted it to be, and I'm satisfied with that.
It's a good show.
Yeah, it's a
It's
good
just
show.
period, end of story. It's a good show. They did it. They pulled it off. We're back in Middle Earth,
Yeah.
and there's just room for Cliff. Final thoughts on how you like the show, and do they need to improve? Are you happy where it's at?
I'd like to leave the show with one last piece of advice for the writers and all the writers and all the showrunners and everybody who's there listening. Um, it is not true that you have to be more clever than the fans.
Mm,
So don't try to do that.
yes.
Don't try to do that anymore. Don't try to outsmart the fans. Please don't do that to us. Please don't. That is not that is not where the building blocks of really good storytelling are going to come from. And it is not going to improve our attitude in general about whether you're, giving us a really earnest adaptation or whether you're trying to outsmart us again.
Yep.
Don't try. Not. I don't want to feel. I don't want to feel like I'm being outsmarted by television writers who think that they're too clever by far,
Yeah.
that they can, do and spin all these plates on stage.
Yeah.
It's not a vaudeville act. You don't
No.
need to run around back and forth keeping all those plates spinning. You can lean into the appendices and the way that Tolkien structured these things a bit more, and we'll see what happens. And I'm grateful that they are trying so hard. I will say that. I have a sense of what worked and what didn't work, but still I haven't lost my gratitude
Yes.
that they're doing it anyways.
Yes. I think everything was in earnest.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right. Well, there you go, folks. That's the report card. Let's take it full screen. Visuals, season 1 report card. Visuals get an A. Acting gets an A, maybe an A plus with some of you. We know who you are. The pacing is a C minus. Writing is a C. Fidelity to Tolkien and his themes is a C minus. A for special effects and visual effects. A plus for music. Congrats to Bear McCreary and Howard Shore. By the way, we forgot to talk about Fiona Apple's amazing rendition of the Ringverse in the final episode. A for audio mixing, and B minus for the graphics and titles, even though I would give that a much lower grade. And B minus for marketing. We really appreciate that Amazon, a big, crazy corporation who should have no business dealing with anybody less than 20 million followers.
Don't know how they noticed me at all. But
and overall production is a B, and this has been a wonderful conversation. I can't believe I just looked at the time. I'm so sorry to keep you so long.
We did it. We had to talk it through, and here we are all together. I want to say thank you. So kind of you to join us, my dear. You are lovely to join us tonight. Thank you.
Well, thank you for inviting me and having me. It's been great.
And shout out to Varking and Nerd of the Rings and all of our regulars in the chat
all
rooms.
Of our friends.
Yeah.
That's been
big
the best
hello.
thing,
Big
is making
wonderful
all
hello
these
out
friends.
there. We have grown. And that's the best part of this whole thing as a community. I think our sense of activity and our sense of engagement in this community has grown. And that's a wonderful, wonderful, wonderful thing that cannot be overlooked. So thank you.
It warms the heart.
Yeah, it does. It's great stuff. So
the best part was the friends we met along the way. I mean, it's cliche,
Exactly. It is cliche, but that is exactly how I feel.
Yeah.
I hope Amazon feels that this London 30 group is like the freshman class, and I hope we all earned our grade to carry on to sophomore year, and we get invited back.
Yeah.
Another pass. But the big thing is the fandom is strong, and I've seen a lot of data that the views are real. People are watching the show. The conversation has gone offline. and people want to say, oh man, look at the Twitter trends like Rings of Power versus House of the Dragon and all this stuff. It's like the conversation is happening on group text messages and WhatsApp groups and iMessages.
In Caitlin's neighborhood, she's talked to her neighbors about it.
Yeah, it's like I'm getting that too. You know, everywhere I go, oh yeah, did you like the show? Like people are talking about the show. They're just not doing it online because because moderation online has spoiled the thing, and that's nobody's fault except the platforms themselves. Twitter, get your act together. We want to have a good time on Twitter again. I don't think that's going to happen anytime soon. So we hope that you guys join our Discord because that's where a lot of wonderful conversation is happening. And also, our message boards are still up. They're 20 years old, and they're still going strong. And TikTok, we're not on TikTok, but you know who is? Silmarillion Emily. How do I say your name?
I say it like Silmarillion, like Silmarillion, but then it just changes into my name. Which is
Silmaremily?
Silmarillion.
Silmaremily. That's it. Silmaremily.
On TikTok.
I love it. That's so great. Yeah, everybody follow Silmaremily. It's going to be great fun. You know where I'm at. I'm at QuickBeam2000 on Twitter and Instagram. Although I have been taking long, languorous breaks from social media for my health and to just chill my brain. And so that's nice, but I come back every now and then. I'm glad that we didn't talk about the stupid NFT thing today. I'm glad we did not talk about that.
We'll go back to our regularly scheduled gossip at Green Dragon Gossip.
We'll do that later.
Next week.
So it is now time to say goodbye to everyone. Beautiful, beautiful people in the chat. Thank you to Nerd Cookies and Matt, Nerd of the Rings, and of Gondor, and Monica, Garth. Look, our staff members are there. Varking is there in the room with us. Thomas, Sharon, and everybody. Oh, look who's in there. Otaku Senpai, Daisy Kim, Orion's Angel. Great live chat. Some of my most favorite people. But again, it's time to go. And then next Tuesday, we'll have more mischief and more fun. And maybe we'll have some more surprises in store. Knowing Justin, that's how it's going to go down. So I want to say good night. Have a safe night. Take care of one another and be very gentle with one another because that's the way it's got to be. All right. And lots of love, everyone. We'll see you next Tuesday, 5:00 p.m. right here, Pacific time, for more Torn Tuesday. Signing off now. I love to say it every week. I'd like to say buenos noches y buena suerte. Good night and good luck.